Welcome all who are here gathered in Zoom land. We'll begin this evening with 3 public hearings. The first of which is the CBDG multifamily rehab grant application. And David West is here, our notable planner, to explain what this is about.
Thank you, guys. So I'm going to give an introduction to the CDBG program, what this public hearing is about, and then there will be time for comments from the public and also questions. So CDBG is Community Development Block Grant. It's federal money that's made available through New York State. So the federal government gives it to New York State, then New York State has a competitive process to give it to towns, villages, and very small cities. Larger cities get an automatic amount. So Ithaca automatically gets money every year. We compete for it. In order to compete for this money, you need to have a public hearing about the community's needs and also put together a fairly complex application documenting needs that you have and laying out a program. The town currently has a community development block grant program that is focused at providing help to low-income homeowners to rehab their homes. And later in the meeting today, we'll hopefully approve the first house in this program to be renovated. That program, again, is for single-family homeowners who are low-income. All CDBG programs have to be focused on low-income individuals. What we're proposing to pursue this year is funding to help multifamily properties that are rented to low-income people. The state makes available up to $500,000 that we could request through this program. Statewide, there's approximately $15 million for housing activities. We can apply for money every year. Programs are 2 years long. We currently, in our program now, we have 11 to 15 slots, depending on how much we spend on each house, and 19 applicants. So we know that there's more demand than we have money for. And we hope when we wrap up that program to apply for more money next year. There's a couple things that I need to say that are bureaucratically focused. So this public hearing is being conducted pursuant to section 507.486 subpart 1 of the CFR in compliance with the requirements of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. So what we'd like to hear from the community is if you have any concerns about the way the CDBG program has been run in the past, if you have ideas of what things you think the town should consider pursuing funding for. And also, this is a chance to let you know that we have this program going. Our single family homeowner program is run by Toma Development. People watching online, you can look them up. THOMA is how their name's spelled, and their phone number is 753-14333. We also have their information listed on the town website, so you can find it there. So with that said, I think I'll open up the public hearing to comments, and I'll come up to the table so I can help you with questions if people have questions about the program.
So is there anyone here present who would like to comment on the CDBG program? If you come up with it.
My name is Judy Barger, and I just was wondering on this housing that they're trying to do. First of all, it's a nonprofit organization, so we will not get any tax revenue whatsoever for this. You have to change the laws because when building a house in Danby, isn't it 5 acres of land that you have to have? So our zoning will be different. So does that open our zoning for everybody else?
I'm not sure I understand what
What I'm trying to say is, if I want to build a house right at this moment, I have to have 5 acres of land. No, I don't?
Depends on where you are. You know.
Oh, okay. So in other words, I have an acre of land and I don't.
Judy, what we're getting comments on now is the specific
grant.
grant.
Okay, the grant. All right. I looked up these people that want to do this in this area. And on their YouTube video, it sounded like it was a done deal already. They said that, and that was 4 months ago.
So I think there's some confusion because there is no one coming to do anything. This is a program that helps people who own properties that are in town, fix them up so that they're nicer for the people who live there.
So it's not building, it's repairing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a rehabilitation thing for
Okay, the rehabilitation.
houses that are run
Yeah.
down and people who can't afford to fix them, basically.
Okay,
And there's
so
no YouTube videos about
what
it.
about all our abandoned houses,
Totally,
Yeah.
like
totally different.
right
subject.
next door?
Yeah, so we have a program now that can help people who are low income who own houses fix them. Most of our abandoned houses aren't owned by low income people, they're owned by investors.
Not on my road. I live on West Miller Road. There's a house, I think it's 33. It's been abandoned for years. She probably pays taxes on it, but it's quite the eyesight. I mean, there's garbage all around it. I'm sure all kinds of stuff. And why no one's gone there and approached her? She doesn't even live in Danby anymore.
I think you're talking about Linda Wyatt's house.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this program is funding for the houses where people live. You can't use it for a second house. So she has another house outside of.
Well, what are you gonna do about that place?
Well, I mean, it's her private property.
Oh, okay, so I can have all the junk cars and all the crap in my yard I want, and that's okay.
No.
Really? I have a neighbor just like that.
Do you have any questions or comments about the CDBG program?
I just wanted to know about that, and I wanted to know about that farm that they planned on putting up with the 4 houses.
That's, the
And,
town hasn't received any application for that project, so,
oh, well, on their YouTube video, they said it was a done deal.
well,
I,
I don't think that's correct.
Have to check that out.
yeah, you have to search for it, but it
Yeah.
was, one of the girls on there said, you know, they got it sealed and delivered. Plus that we were going to get that area was going to get an $87,000.
They did get a grant from the county,
Mhm.
but it's contingent on them finding a legally, permitted place to do the project.
Okay, and so this is not going to be this year?
Probably not. I mean, we haven't had an application.
Oh, well,
This is not related to, I think might be some confusion in the sound and the name of what that is with the name of the people who did the other study. The sound Toma sounds like the other project and they're two very different things.
okay,
What this is about this rehab block grant for people who actually own a house and want and live in it and want to repair it but can't afford it. It has nothing to do with anything else. Not
well,
about
we
deserted.
already have a program out there. If you go to the Office of the Aging, they do that stuff. They put in windows and roofs.
There's many ways that people can look for help, and this is where Danby is, there's an interest in the part of the people who live here and the town members and many people who would like to be able to help other people, and that's basically what we're talking about. This is a grant program. It's not money, it's not your tax money, it's a grant program.
from Hopkins County,
From
No,
the state.
from
from the state.
And ultimately
Sort
from
of.
the federal government.
Well, yeah, and then it goes right back to us.
Oh, yeah, in a diluted way.
So, okay, I guess that's cleared up. So, but could you just tell me what you're gonna do with all these places that are abandoned? I mean, if someone's driving through this town, it's
We've
pretty,
actually started talking about that.
it's disgusting.
It's part of our budget discussion.
Well, if
Yeah.
you go on these people that own the house, yes, they are paying their taxes. I don't know why you can't do anything else.
We could talk about it, but not
Yeah.
now.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
thanks.
Is anyone else would like to address the CDBG process and opportunities?
So we can potentially get $5,000, is that what you said?
So 500,000.
500.
Yes, so we can ask for up to $500,000.
Okay,
What we ask for is contingent on the waiting list that
Right.
we have. So and how much we determine it's gonna cost to fix homes.
is there
So
something we can do
to get
to
more,
increase the waiting list? I
yeah,
mean, approach people or,
absolutely. So I recently mailed letters to everyone on our list of multifamily properties that code enforcement is supposed to inspect every couple of years. Which isn't a complete list of all multifamily properties, but it's what we have. It's pretty good. So I sent letters to all of those properties. We have 6 units of housing signed up already. The rule of thumb for a successful application is to have 2.5 times as many units on the waiting list as you say you can get done. So for our homeowner rehab, we put together a waiting list of around 30 for proposing to do around 12 units in a year or in a 2-year period. So we are looking for people who own any multifamily property. That means 2 units. It can be 2 units that are on parcels next to each other, but it can't be 1 unit. So if you own a house that's by itself and you rent, that doesn't count. But if you own 2 units and up, and you are comfortable renting at least half of those units to people who make below 80% of the median income for Tompkins County, which I can tell you more about what it is, but that's a lot of teachers and firefighters and other kind of middle-class people fall within that boundary. If you'll rent half of the units, more than half, 51% of the units to those people, then there's an opportunity to get on the wait list for this program.
Is there anyone who is attending remotely who would like to comment? Ted.
There we go. Can you all hear me clearly? I was told after last night's meeting that people on Zoom and me in particular couldn't be heard in the meeting
a
room.
little bit.
Well,
I think it's a little better.
we can hear you.
Clearly.
The audio is not as good as it is for you, hearing others who are also attending remotely. Or for that matter,
Okay.
to a
So-
microphone.
So please raise a hand if you can't understand anything. I'm quite happy to repeat. Well, these are really questions for David about CDBG. You talked briefly about this last night at the planning board meeting. And after the meeting, another participant remarked that this is going to mean an awful lot of new Section 8 housing or just Section 8 housing in Danby. Now that was the statement. Now the questions. First of all, maybe you could define what Section 8 is. I'm not really sure, and explain why it's considered undesirable. Does CDBG necessarily imply that there will be additional housing of that kind? And finally, I'm just curious about tax implications. If a house is improved, I'm going to assume that its value will go up. So is it possible that because of the increased value of that house, the other properties in Danby might go down in tax assessment just a tiny little bit?
Pretty tiny, all right?
All right, I'll try to address some of those questions. I don't know who said that this would result in more Section 8 housing. That's not remotely true. I don't know where they would have gotten that from. They don't know what they're talking about. What is Section 8 housing? It's actually not called Section 8 anymore, but that was the name of a former part of federal law that provides what's called housing choice vouchers, which is a voucher to a low-income household so that they can rent any housing that they want in the community, and the federal government pays the portion of the rent that they can't afford. There's a cap on what it can be, which is called the fair market rent. So let's say, your household income for a two-person household was, $1,200 a month, and they would determine that you can afford to pay a third of that in rent, and the fair market rent would be around $1,400. So you could rent a $1,400 apartment, you would pay what you could afford, and the program would pay the rest. So there is no such thing as Section 8 housing, because the Section 8 program pays for people to rent whatever housing they want. Why is it considered bad? It's not. I think if you consider it bad, you're probably confused, perhaps bigoted, but it's definitely not a bad thing. It also doesn't actually exist as Section 8 housing. It's just, it's actually illegal for any landlord to not rent through Section 8 to a tenant. So all housing is potentially Section 8 housing. Again, this is a program that pays to renovate existing units. So it's not bringing any new units. It would be great if it could be used for that because we really need it, but it can't. It's just for fixing up units that are here now. In terms of tax implications, I'd say that it's widely overblown how much fixing a house will increase its value. A large portion of the value of a house is the basics. How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, what neighborhood it's in. The condition is a very small portion of that. So most people who, don't fix up their house because they think the taxes are going to go up, it doesn't really work that way. There is some impact, when you pull a building permit, assessment does know, but most of the value of your house is based on what other houses around yours sell for. And then the basic, room count, area, etc. So would it make other people's houses go down if a house was fixed up and its value went up? Not likely. I don't.
Not much anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, if the value of the house increases, that increases the tax base by that incremental little bit divided by several $1 million.
Right.
Tax base is not going to make much of an impact.
Yeah. So I think that hits all the questions.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, anyone else? Seeing none, let's close that public hearing. And next public hearing is on a local law to implement tax abatement for conservation easement properties. This is something that's been a long time coming. We were authorized by the state of New York at the end of 2022. Well, we authorized it earlier in the year, but the governor didn't sign it into law until late in the year to implement a local program to abate people's taxes in exchange for commitments to not develop them for periods of time. And so what's new here, well, the abatement is new. And what's also new is the associated opportunity to have temporary easements, which we haven't had in the past. All of our conservation easements are permanent easements. This program will enable temporary easements to be created and for the abatement to be linked to the length of the commitment. So permanent easement gets you a 90% reduction in your property tax. The town tax and the school district and the fire district have the opportunity to opt in, but they're not required to. Same thing with the county. And we spent quite a bit of time exploring the possibility of having the county participate. And after several frustrating months of not getting anywhere with them, decided that we would go ahead with approving a local law so that people could at least qualify for the town portion of their property tax. And that is the likely outcome for a while until we having put the law in place, we can still get, or try to get the school district and the county to opt in after the fact. Are there questions about it? Anybody want to know anything more about what it entails? I can say a little bit more. When or if, would you like, yeah, sure.
I just have a question about what a temporary easement is. Can you go into that?
Yeah, well, it's temporary, it's one that doesn't last forever.
Well,
So.
but are there parameters around it? I mean,
Well, that's the addition I was going to say, is that the parameters would be determined by local policy, essentially. We probably, well, first of all, the easement only applies to the land for commitments of a minimum of 15 years, 15 to 30, 30 to 50, or 50 to 75 are the three, and then permanent. So if somebody commits to, let's say, 15 years, the abatement applies to the value of the land and not the improvements. So for small people with smaller properties, most of their equity is in the improvements and not in the land. The abatement only applies to the land. There's a fair amount of work in creating these easements. So it's not something that will appeal to somebody who has 2 acres or 5 acres even.
I understand that. I'm just wondering what we get out of a 15-year easement and how much it costs.
Right, and so there are 2 things that we can to address that. One, we can have a fee associated with processing the applications that would cover some of the expense of doing it at all, which of course will make it less attractive for small holders.
Right.
And the benefit is that we know that for a period of commitment, at least, that property will not be developed. So that's the public benefit that's driving it. The whole easement program that we do is aimed at reducing the development potential mostly in the outlying portions of the town. And this was driven by when we had our planning group, a substantial group of large landowners who were saying that the rapidly escalating land values are making taxes increasingly burdensome cost of ownership, and they needed relief. And we had a working subgroup that looked into the options for getting relief, and they discovered that there's pre-existing state framework.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, and the group coalesced around, well, let's do that because it's something
Okay.
other towns have already done. It requires state legislative authorization in order to do it all. But since others had done it, if we duplicate the template, which was generated by the DEC.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I'm just refresh my memory on, like, if you say I'm going to put this aside for 15 years, what proportion of your taxes get overlooked?
30%.
30%. Okay.
For
Thank you.
15.
Thank you.
May I get the name for the record, please?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Janice?
I need the person's name for the record.
James Rundle.
Sorry, I
Jim
did
Rundle.
Jim Rundle. Thank you.
Anyone else want to comment? Question? Oh, of course, Ted.
Thank you. So you've opened the public hearing. This is not a question.
That's correct.
Okay.
Public comment.
Jim just asked a couple of good questions, and you did provide the answers to his questions, but I'd like to talk a little bit about why I'm in favor of this and present the same answers, maybe in slightly different words. I am in favor of this, by the way. Some years ago, I lived on West King Road, and I enjoyed a fantastically wonderful vista out on the other side of King Road. fireflies. Oh, it was just amazing. And then one day the houses started getting built in that property. And that's when I became aware of the phrase zoning by owning. In other words, if you don't own the property next to you and you appreciate its view or some other aspect of it, the naturalness of it, you are basically taking advantage of someone else's property. The only way you can guarantee that is by buying that property. But buying those large tracts of property is not an option for most residents of Danby. I mean, it's a lot of money, especially these days with land prices just going through the roof. So you talked about a group of large landowners. Actually, I don't know that they were all large, although certainly large landowners are the people who are providing a quality of life for the people of Danby. The group of landowners got together and made a proposal, did a little research, as you said. And the idea there was say, look, we are providing quality of life for the people of Danby. And as such, we want Danby to recognize that by doing what they can to lower our taxes. I should add that there is no question that this desire, this intent for quality of life is present in the oh no, I've just forgotten the name of the document, the basic underlying document that talks about planning in Danby. It's there and it was passed by the town board, but there was no action taken to it. That said, the path that was recommended, the legislation, which is more or less what you are now going to be considering, recognize that not everybody wants to tie up their land in an easement forever. And other towns in New York State have this same law. And the one town that is probably closest to Danby in its situation, and which also has a very active program of this type, enacted exactly what we have now, what you're being asked to vote on. And pretty much everybody who signed up, and they had a lot of people sign up for conservation easements, were farmers, and they all signed up for the minimum term, 15 years. 15 years later, this has been around for a while, they all renewed. So once you're in the program, it's, you're going to keep with it because it costs the landowner nothing. They're just saying, I'm not going to build on it. And they don't, if they have the right, if they were going to do a conservation easement anyway, they didn't intend to build on it in the first place. So they're providing something to the town and they're getting something that costs the town nothing. It does cost the other taxpayers something because if the tax base goes down, that means the remaining taxes are apportioned among fewer people. But we did work out those numbers and presented them to the planning board and other groups. Jim heard it there. The numbers are very small. If an incredible proportion of the landowners who have large properties entered this program, we're talking dollars per year, not hundreds of dollars per year to each of the other 1,500 landowners. So it's a small thing to recognize the fact that your quality of life depends on people who own the land that you appreciate the sight of. And I would, Joel mentioned that the actual awarding of, whether the participation in this program will be by policy of the town of Danby. And I do recall that at various town board meetings, you talked about never permitting anything that was at less than the maximum length of each time period. I recommend against that. I think that the policy should allow anybody who wants it, minimum, maximum, let them try it out for 15 years. 15 years is no laughing matter. It's longer than most of you have been on the board. 15 years is quite a time. Let them try it out. They'll like it and they'll keep it. There were also concerns voiced about nefarious people taking advantage of this program to basically not pay taxes. Excuse me?
Ed, could you kind of round up your comments because you're running on.
I could.
And if we could, I just brief interruption, can we please not have so much talk in the audience? It's very confusing and hard. It's competing with all of the comments. Yeah, the time for the 3 minutes is long over.
It is, although you will, if you look at your timers, previous speakers have had quite a bit more than 3 minutes. So I will wrap up. Thank you.
Because other people speak doesn't mean you can't.
Right. So there's a difference between being in the room and doing it by Zoom.
No.
So we.
I'm not, by the way, I'm not wedded to 3 minutes in a public hearing.
Okay. In any case, Joel, let me wrap up. I did want to mention the fact that there were accusations that nefarious people would use this program in order to pay less taxes on their land before splitting it up. Frankly, I don't know anybody who would do that. You're not going to have a conservation easement just to make money. You're really not. So long and short of it, I think this is a great idea. It's not going to cost the town anything. It's not going to cost all the rest of the taxpayers very much at all. And I hope you pass it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to say that it does cost the town money to put together easements.
Yeah, it does. And we, as I mentioned, one of the options would be to include a fee to cover that cost.
Yeah.
Greg, I see you have your hand up. But not anymore. Greg Nelson? Would you like to comment?
Needs to be unmuted. There he goes.
You're still muted, though.
He unmuted and then he muted again.
Sorry, Greg, that was me. If you could unmute.
Okay,
There you go.
sorry. I was unable to unmute myself. So I very briefly just want to say that even as a taxpayer who might potentially pay a little bit extra, I do support the idea of conservation easements for many of the reasons that Ted outlined. I believe that this would offer another path to preserving the character of Danby, while making it easier potentially on people who live here already to afford to keep their land undeveloped.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so let's close that public hearing. And open the third public hearing, which is on the local law proposed to convert from elected to appointed town clerk, which, if we were to pass it, would be subject to mandatory referendum. Comments?
I'm Jim Rundle. I live at 103 Nelson Road. I served on the planning board for 7 years, and I was chair for about 2.5, I think. Both those positions I was appointed to by the board. I was not elected, and that made sense to me because the board makes policy on the planning board. What we did basically was apply the laws that are passed by the board. We also recommended laws or changes to laws. And if you looked at our record on that, we were pretty effective. And that's because, of course, we didn't pursue anything that we weren't pretty sure the board was interested in. So it doesn't make sense to me that the clerk would be an elected position. It seems to me that a clerk should be answerable to the board, just as our planning board is answerable to the board. And so I am in favor of passing that, the law that you're considering later on, to convert it from an elected position to an appointed position. It's not a policy-making position. It's voters who want to see policy go in a certain direction should vote vote their opinions. when they vote for board members. It doesn't make any sense to me to do that with the town clerk. It's an important position, but it should be answerable to the board. Thank you.
Kevin?
I'm Kevin Feeney. I live at 365 Gunderman Road, and I guess I'm on the opposite side from Jim there. I think that the clerk is answerable to the people of the town. The clerk is the person who manages the records of the goings on of the town so that the people can interface with what's going on and look back through the records, see what was said, see who, made what decisions, see how they came to come to those decisions, manages the minutes of the meetings and all of that stuff. And their job is to faithfully record that information and transmit it to the people of the town. It's not to be a lackey for the board. I mean, it'd certainly be more convenient if they had a good social relationship with the board so that everything flowed back and forth well, but that's not really their job. Their job was established by the state to be the record holder for the town. And that's what we depend on them to do. And so to bring them into the fold of being controlled by the board, I think is the wrong direction. And I think generally, anytime that you're taking more of the decision-making power away from the people and concentrating it back into a smaller and smaller group of folks who run the town or whatever, I think that's the wrong direction to go. And I favor keeping the clerk as an elected position because those of us in the rest of the town depend on the clerk as our interface to the town information. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Mauricio Medina, 808 Comfort Road. I'd have to also kind of echo what Kevin just said, in the sense that I feel we're living in a time where more and more of our choices are being taken away. And that's another, a position that feels like, why would, what is the benefit for me to lose the ability to vote for somebody? There isn't any. Anytime I feel like, and pretty much just what Kevin said is just, we're concentrating power for some reason, and it just seems like the wrong way to go in a democratic society. I just feel that's not the way I want to keep going. So I totally oppose making that position, an appointed position. I like to see it stay as it is, as an elected position.
Others in the room?
Hi, Shannon Sessler at 530 Comfort Road. I oppose it going appointed. It should be elected. We need to have somebody objectionable, somebody that isn't saying, if you appoint, if you have a boss that tells you do X, Y, and Z, that's what you're going to do. If their boss is you guys, she can put whatever she wants in there, whatever you want in a document. If she answers to us, the public, then she needs to be honest and tell us exactly what's happening. I hope there's nothing questionable going on. I'm not accusing anybody of that, but let's keep it that way. The more people you have that are directly under you, the more distrust there's going to be in the community that says you guys are hiding something. And right now, I don't think that's the feeling you want out there among the voters. So I'm against it.
Did you, Janice, did you capture that name?
Yeah.
I got Shannon Sessler.
This
Shannon Sessler, like his shirt.
We've got three people on the screen who are interested. Ivan, you want to go first?
Hi, yeah, I would also just echo those comments. I think an elected town clerk is a good source of accountability against the town board and keeping a publicly available record of decisions and minutes made. And so I am opposed to adopting a elected or a appointed position. I would think it should be kept elected. Thanks. Ivan Ross, 88 East Miller Road.
Greg. There you go.
Greg Nelson, 6 White Hawk Lane. Following several other speakers, I believe that the transparency that comes from an independent position for the town clerk is important. I also, in the past, the issues come up about the highway superintendent position and changing that. And it was explained that part of the rationale for that was the challenge of finding qualified candidates within the pool of people who could be elected. I don't hear any suggestion that we don't have qualified candidates within Danby for this position. So I don't understand why the switch to appointment is being promoted in this circumstance. And I would certainly favor keeping it as an elected position. Thank you.
I would say that if you want to hear the rationale, that would be probably part of the discussion when we take up the matter later in the meeting. Deborah Montgomery.
Yeah, I just have to agree with several that have spoken previously. I think that it's important that this position remains a point of transparency between, what goes on in the town meeting. The only connection we have to that is really through the minutes that we can read, on the website. And there needs to be complete transparency in that. And it needs to be decisions that the person that's delivering that information needs to be elected by the people. I think the state made the law for a reason. I understand there's other communities that maybe have voted it out, but I think it's a good one and we should keep it. And as it's gone in the past, we voted on this several times in Danby prior to me joining this beautiful town, but I think it should go in the same direction. I definitely support it remaining an elected position. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment? Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, you do, because they can't hear you unless you use it.
My name is Judy Barger, and I have a question. People are opposed to having the board have the town clerk. So what I want to know is, are we going to, as a community, going to be able to vote on it, or is it just going to be the board that decides if you're going to elect one yourself or the community is going to?
If we pass the law, it is a mandatory referendum, so the voters get to decide in November whether they agree to switch from elected to appointed.
Okay, well, so it will be in November that we will vote on this.
Correct.
I expressed that I think it should be open to the public. She is a servant for everybody in the community. And if we don't like her after a year or how many, 2 years, we can vote her out as a community, as the group of Danby. But if we don't like her and you got the ability to pick who you want, you have, as a town board, you are being more self-serving to yourself and get who you want. And the community might not like them or her. So I think that we should keep it open and we don't have too many votes, and rights that I don't think a small group of people will run the town. And that's the only thing I can say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and a person who might have the last word on the matter, Judge Craig.
Sorry, did you just, I couldn't hear you clearly. Did you just recognize me?
Good. That was a yes.
Ah, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm here to speak out against this, this idea of abolishing an elected official's position. The first thing that I think I have to say is that the record, the creator of the record, of an official record of the actions of elected officials cannot be answerable to those elected officials. I'm not talking necessarily about Danby, could be any elected officials anywhere. There is a incentive for them to tailor the record to make themselves look good so that they can be reelected. I think that an independent clerk, at least as far as the minutes is concerned, is very important. I've been to quite a few of your meetings, almost all of the meetings, during which, maybe all, during which this subject was discussed at the town board meeting. And you're aware that this sort of action was previously rejected by the voters several times. And you,
Not for this.
this sort of action, if you want me to,
For a different position. This
I was
position
about-
has never been referendum on this matter.
I was about to continue and say, and in fact, you originally proposed to abolish both the town clerk and the highway superintendent as elected positions. When it became apparent, I was at the meeting, so you probably remember it too, that this idea did not have complete support from the board, possibly because the highway superintendent had been voted down so many times. Joel, I believe you modified your motion to include only the town clerk. Joel, you also, how should I say, you said during one meeting, you said the quiet part out loud. You said that we are doing this because we have, not your words, on my words, a tense relationship with the town clerk. And I would like to submit, you did say it, I have it recorded. I would like to submit that the relationship between the town board and the town clerk, it's never wonderful. You know, there are always going to be issues in any sort of elected positions. In this case, I do think the town board has some issues, reasonable issues with the clerk. I also think the clerk has reasonable issues with the town board. This is not one-sided. And changing the law in order to force your way on an elected official, basically by throwing them out of office, is not a good thing. It's not a long-term sustainable project. Just because you don't think you can work with her doesn't mean that you should change the law. There are various other things I could say, but I'll just finish up by saying I think this would be a very bad idea, and I think it would reflect badly both on the town board and on the voters of the town who have elected these people.
Okay, thanks. And of course, it's perfectly appropriate that Janice have an opportunity to weigh in on that as well. Go ahead, Janice. Are you gonna come out?
Yes, okay.
Hello, I'm Janice Edelman. I actually do have an anonymous correspondence that was dropped off today. It basically reiterated what everybody else has already said, so I will link that to the meeting minutes. I did prepare comments, and again, a lot of what I was going to say was what everyone else has said. I am Janice Edelman. I am the current town clerk for the town of Danby, and I just want to reiterate that I was appointed in September of 2020. So the argument of being able to, look at someone's credentials is a little bit of a red herring in this case. I was clearly assessed in that manner, and I was selected as the most credentialed. So I don't know why all of a sudden there is this change of heart. I haven't changed any of my working habits. As you know, Joel, from the start, we've had besides the fact that we've had a really good relationship, you've always said, we need the minutes, we need the minutes, we need the minutes. And I was saying, I know, I'm getting my bearings. I'm trying to get everything settled out, right? So the minutes being delayed is not a recent occurrence, and it's not something that's new, right? What is new is people besides you wanting to read the minutes and comment on the minutes and point out all of my typos. That is new. You know, when I ran for election in 2021, everybody on this board now and everybody on the previous board fully supported me and helped me to get into my position. So again, I just don't know where the breakdown has occurred. It seems to me that it really is a personnel issue. And I'm going to skip ahead because we all know that there's a ton of statutory requirements that has been outlined in New York Town's Law, Section 30. And I could go through them and tell you how I'm doing all of those, but I'll save that for another time. You know, there's another argument about elected officials not being accountable. And in this particular case, the elected official is me, but the elected officials are also you. You are also not accountable to anybody but the residents. So if people want to get rid of any one of you, they can with the next election, right? So it's not just about me. I'll just conclude. I have so much to say because I love talking, but I'll just conclude by saying, you know, municipal clerks, I got this off of a great town report. Municipal clerks are often the first and most direct link between residents and government. And the position is also responsible for providing transparency in local government. The town clerk is responsible for providing transparency in local government. There is no way that a clerk can be expected to fulfill that crucial responsibility if they are in constant fear of losing their job because they answer to the town board. Thanks.
Anybody else like to comment? You already did. On this one.
I just want to add to some, this is Shannon Fessler again. A comment Ted Crane said about that the town board says they have issues with the current clerk. You posted on Facebook, that's no secret that the town board is not happy with the current clerk.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make that clear. You told Ted that that was not ever said. I just wanted to make it clear. It's public record.
That's not what Ted accused me of
No, I
having
think it
said.
was in reference to the possibility of changing from elected to appointed. It wasn't necessarily related to any issues that are going on.
That's not what I understood.
Yeah,
so maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not.
But that's true. I mean, that's true.
I have never, and I'm not now going to suggest that we don't have differences with the town clerk. We do. But that is not the reason for opposing the change. It's not, I'm not going to say it doesn't have some influence on it, but in this particular instance, it's making the change would make no difference to Janice. She is not on the ballot in November.
Makes a difference to us.
Well, maybe so, but the point is the law pass, whether that law passes and whether it's endorsed by the voters does not have the effect of throwing the clerk out of office. And we're not out to get Janice. That is not the motivation, and it is not the result of making the change if we make it. And to point out again, it's not for us to make anyway. I mean, we can propose it, but the voters are going to decide whether they're willing to go along or not. And the arguments have to be made on both sides, and we will make them. You know, I mean, so far all we've heard mostly tonight is why not. The why will be part of our discussion when because you know both sides need to be considered when we take it up. Anyway, that's later in the meeting. Does anybody else would like to comment? Go ahead. Stay tuned. We'll get to it. Okay.
If I may also add a very brief comment. What I said earlier.
I've had enough comments, frankly, but well, go ahead. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah,
It's brief indeed.
I did not- I was careful not to take too long previously. Since it probably will come up during your discussion later in the meeting that Pat proposed a procedure for how a committee would be formed to recommend who should be appointed as a town clerk. And I would like to repeat what I said at an earlier meeting under privilege of the floor, which is a committee which is designed and appointed and contains several town board members is hardly going to be independent of the town board. I'm sorry, that's the way it appears to the public. You don't have to agree, but that is the way it appears. And what's more, these deliberations, which will be in effect taking the place of the voters' will, just as you must interview your town board candidates in public, that's coming up later in the meeting, the public will not be able to necessarily participate or even watch the goings on of that committee. So I although I appreciate the desire or the intent of separating the recommendation from the approval process, I'm sorry, but you aren't talking about a committee that is really going to represent the voters.
No, I'm inclined to agree with you, Ted. We're not. Greg, did you want to say something further?
Yes, if I may, very briefly again. I think that if the goal is to change this position, perhaps the first step, rather than this law, should be electing a town clerk candidate on a platform of changing the town clerk position. And if people can get behind someone who feels that that position should be an appointed position, then it might make sense for this next step to occur. But this seems like an abrupt introduction of a change in my estimation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Anyone else? Okay, so let's close that public hearing. And call the regular meeting to order. We have a couple of additions to the agenda. One is on the agreement to spend highway funds. Another is on the late addition, the resolution to approve the two things related to CBDG. One, essentially approving the first homeowner participant, and the second one on the multifamily application. And all of those should go where?
At the end, but we already have the approving the no, we don't.
It's not on there?
Strange.
Oh, geez. Yes, and they both need to be on there, they put at the end.
Yeah.
Oh. In fact, interviews are not on the agenda either.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Okay, they are now, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else to take on or put on?
Please, I can't make this stop scrolling for the agenda.
Oh, interesting.
May I borrow it for a minute? Thank you.
Maybe we could have, I don't know if everybody is aware of it, but last night at the planning board, there was an interesting discussion about a proposed, in the very baby stages, a proposed solar farm. And I don't know if everybody is aware of that. Maybe David could even give a 3-minute, just blurb, 2-minute blurb on that. Just,
could be done under announcement.
just yeah. I just think it's an important thing for people because it's something that a lot of residents are really have strong feelings about, and you know, we're likely to hear things, and
I think the plan was to put something in David's report on, in the town newsletter,
Mhm.
which will certainly inform a lot more
Yeah,
people
that's
here.
Yeah,
But we could
it's true.
add to an already very long agenda if you really think it's good. And
Well, when does that come out? That won't come out until the first, right? The end of, is it next week already?
yeah,
Monday night,
Okay,
yeah, coming soon.
we do Monday night.
I think I'm going on vacation.
Please, no.
Okay, we can.
I could do 30 seconds.
Yeah, right.
Maybe everybody already knows about it.
Rumor mill, right? For other things. Okay, privilege of the floor.
Wait, I might add one little thing if you want. I did talk to Spectrum. If I could just give a very, very tiny report with what I talked to about internet for people in Danby, broadband.
Yeah.
It's really short and very informal.
Why don't we do that in the announcements too?
Yeah. I think it's not just Spectrum, it's all the.
Oh, no, I only got to Spectrum. That's why it's internet, right?
Thank
Yeah, it's only, that's why it's brief and
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just an idea and an introduction.
no,
Right,
it's,
good.
I can't make this stop scrolling. Thank you, Pat. It won't stop. I keep trying to make it go stop at one place, but it won't.
privilege of the floor. Is there anyone here who'd like to address the board on any matter that hasn't already come up?
I kind of would like to ask people to, if you really want to talk to each other, please go out of the room and have the conversation, then come back in because it's very distracting. Please.
Yes,
There we go. Thank you. 1, 2, 3 items. First, an announcement. We have a fairly good audience tonight for the meeting. And I'd like to remind you that the second incarnation of this summer's summer market is taking place this Friday. It's undercover at the pavilion at the fire department. There will, of course, be food vendors, well, veggies and such vendors. There are also some crafts, and I'm just mostly for fun. I'm also bringing my photographs, which can be bought as cards or as canvas wall hangings. That's one. Second, about your agenda, I think it would be a definite positive service if you change the order of the printed agenda to move your executive session to the end, so that all business that the public can listen to can happen before you go out of the room for several minutes. And I also noted that the executive session will be talking about a search for a new planner. And again, at last night's planning board meeting, our planner very honestly said, look, he didn't really, sorry if I'm misquoting you, David, I apologize, but this is what I heard, that you never really intended to make a career of small town planning. You're always looking for something more interesting, and that you're very happy to move up to Geneva to be their planner and what was it called? Economic development specialist. I mention that because I hope that when you consider planners, I hope you're looking for someone who is interested in making a career out of small town planning, who is not necessarily focusing on economic development, but rather what the town people, all of the town people want. And finally, you mentioned the solar farm. I believe yesterday, my final comment about the solar farm was cut off. The microphone went dead or something like that. And just wanted to repeat what I said then, because it's so relevant to everything you're doing tonight, which is that solar farm is probably going to get approved. I like solar farms, but I am very concerned about the impact on the neighbors and other residents of the town. And so, yes, if it's approved, it's a good thing probably, but before approving it, all of the concerns of impact on neighbors have to be addressed, and they should be addressed in a way that leaves those neighbors feeling like they mean something in the process. I would really like to see a solar farm that has happy neighbors, just as I would like to see the town pass laws that has happy residents who appreciate those laws who are being passed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else at Village Board?
Mauricio Medina, again, 808 Comfort Road. I was hoping to make a comment yesterday on that solar farm as well, and I didn't seem to have been able to get on at all. But there's a lot of issues that, and I'm a person that's actually, I was designed and installed solar systems since 1920. I've got a lot of experience doing that, including helping school districts get large solar projects.
Wait, other than you look, since 1920?
I'm sorry, it's for 20 years, for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that, you know, I love ice cream, I love cookies, but like anything else, if that's all I ate and that's all I consumed, that'd be too much and I'd be a very unhealthy person. I wouldn't live long. I think we keep moving into this direction. And again, I have solar system myself. I've installed dozens of them around the area. It gets to a point where when it's too much, this seems to be something that's just being thrown on top of the community without very little thought process or engagement with the folks that are surrounding it. And that was a very obvious and evident that in that presentation, there's a lot lacking in that proposal. I would definitely oppose it if that was their intention, is to just come in and not really engage with the community. Aesthetics is a big thing, and how you treat your neighbors is a big thing. So if this entity wants to come in here and do that, they need to do a lot better job. And I would be gladly offer my expertise and experience in that department to be able to, you know, guide that conversation. So there was a few things that were discussed that I heard folks talking about eminent domain and one thing or another. From what I understand, eminent domain hasn't really taken properties for development for solar yet in the state. Not to say that it hasn't happened, but I'm not that aware of it. And again, it's just something that there needs to be a lot of work done on the developer side if we're going to even consider this project. And I hope to be, you know, at least have a say in moving forward. And again, I may love solar, but I don't want it shoved down my throat like anything else. Thank you.
I think it's worth clarifying that barring some unforeseen development, this will not be a town board action. It's the planning board will deal with this. Did you want to, Kevin? Yeah.
Kevin Feeney, 365 Gunderman. I was not impressed. I'm an engineer by trade, and I have done small solar projects, nothing the size of what Mauricio has done, mostly remote site kind of things, but it wasn't professional. It's like they didn't bring their A game. They weren't dealing with us like we were serious people that they wanted to be, you know, partners in the community. They just sort of slapped something together is what it felt like, and, you know, flung it out there to see what happened. They are a foreign company. They're based in Toronto, and they don't really have any operating projects. They've been approved for a number of projects, and they have, you know, a half a dozen more in the pipeline, but they haven't produced anything yet. We haven't seen what kind of work they do. We haven't seen, you know, what we've seen is they did a sort of a half-assed job trying to, you know, get a proposal in front of the board. I understand that initial things aren't always, you know, roughed out all the way, and it's going to be an iterative thing, but it was not an impressive first step out of the gate. And I would be wary of dealing with that company. You know, it may be that we want to do more solar in the town. I'm in favor of solar generally. I think where it's going to be located is going to be a blight. It's going to be ugly, and it's going to be very apparent to everybody who drives up here from the south. You know, very much like the one that's down just outside of Owego. which covers that entire hillside. You know, the current system that's being built is tucked away where most of the town isn't going to see it. Most of the town's not going to drive by it. This is going to be right out in front of God and everybody. And, you know, like I said, they're not bringing their A game. They're not treating us like a serious partner. They don't have a proven track record, and it's going to be ugly. Thanks.
Hey, we're done with privilege.
Um,
You want to make a comment on the village of the book?
I think I would.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm gonna read something. Since the town board got a little lecture about misleading the public at our last meeting, I would like to start addressing information I consider misleading when I notice it. One of the reasons why I voted to not fund the community council newsletter edited by Ted Crane was because I thought it was weird for the town to be funding an endeavor that was at times very hostile towards the town allocating taxpayer money to support the newsletter. Now that the newsletter no longer receives taxpayer money funneled through the town budget process, it is relying in part on resident donations to fund the publication and mailing. It has also become much more direct in its manner of informing the residents of the town's bad behavior. The most recent community council newsletter contains information that is just not true. I would expect any endeavor taken up by any town's community council that it would actually encourage community and goodwill. That is certainly not happening with parts of their publication. The headline, "What the Town Didn't Tell You," providing information that's not available elsewhere, speaks for itself. It sends a pretty clear message to residents that town government is not to be trusted. If such a column included a heading that included the fact that it was a public or opinion piece, and even offered space for a differing opinion, that could actually be interesting and possibly beneficial to residents. I encourage residents to check the back page of the town's newsletter that lists contact information for town officials and staff. I encourage people to reach out if there are concerns or if you want to share information and try and get good news. That's my opinion.
I would like to make a correction. Ted,
What you just said? Or?
no, to something else actually that Ted had said. Ted had said that the committee that was a possibility for searching for the clerk would consist mostly of town board members. Right. In fact, the committee that was proposed has zero town board members on it. Just a correction.
May I have a few seconds to respond to both of those?
No,
This isn't the place for a discussion, but they are claiming things that are not factual.
But we can, at the next privilege of the floor, the next meeting, you can bring it up.
Yeah, bring it up next time. Right. I mean, I don't think it would be productive to be going into a back and
Privilege of
forth.
the floor is not for discussion, actually.
Privilege of the floor is also not a place for basically non-factual personal attacks.
Wow,
Well,
that's interesting.
right, let's not go there.
Yeah.
Right.
Correspondence?
Correspondence, is there any?
Well,
Well,
James,
there was one thing.
James had one.
There was one for the hearing, which I mentioned, and there was one from Warren Cross that I didn't know. I see Warren Cross is here. I didn't know if he wanted to mention that or not. He's online.
Yes, he is here.
If he wants it on the record, I'll link his email to the minutes.
I can't tell whether you're actually listening there, Warren, or whether you simply have your computer on and it's someplace else. Which might be the case. So yeah, that sounds like a reasonable way to handle it, Jens.
Okay.
Announcements, couple. A brief one from David on the solar.
Well.
Oh, sure.
Well, we already talked about it, but I can tell
I
you.
know, really.
So there will be more about this in the town newsletter, but you can find on the town website, on the calendar for the last planning board meeting, that was yesterday, a link on that agenda to the folder with all of the documents, including all of the public comment that's been provided on a proposed solar array at 2288 Danby Road. So this is 96B near where South Danby Road turns south, next door to the mobile home park there. This proposal was before the planning board for what's called sketch plan review. Sketch plan is a chance to come with a not fully fleshed out proposal, an idea of what might happen to get feedback from the community. And the town in our process for the planning board requires broad notification for that, publication in the newspaper. And that's why so many people have heard of it, because it's a good first chance to hear from people in the community about concerns, so that the project team can then go back and further work on it. Last night we had a long public comment session about that, and people had concerns. I have concerns. I have a 3-page memo of concerns about it. And then it will proceed through the planning board process. So I expect probably not next month, but a few months from now, the company will get back with a more complete application after having worked on the things that they heard, both from the planning board, the public, the fire department, and come back. This proposal was for close to around 20 megawatts of solar altogether in, I think, 5 smaller projects that are each their own parcel. So it's a subdivision and a special use permit process. Just to clarify, the town board does not approve projects like this. And I think it's useful for people to understand. I hear a lot of people, both here and in the community where I live, say things like the town shouldn't do this project, or the town should do something else. The town should, do affordable housing instead of solar, or the town should have more jobs. This is private property, and the private property owner is proposing a use that's allowed in the town, and it's allowed with a whole bunch of other rules and reviews. So the town board actually could have a role, which is the town board could change the zoning to not allow solar in most of the town. Right now, solar is allowed in most of the town because it's a priority to encourage green energy in the town. But as it stands, the town board doesn't really have a role in reviewing an individual site plan. That's the role of the planning board. And it will probably be a long process. The last solar farm that was approved took a year of meetings. I would expect this one will probably be a little faster, although you'll be coming in with a new planner. But it's not going to be in the form that it was provided, and it's not going to be super quick. And there's a bunch of time for.
Or as complicated as the last one, which
is not as it's not nearly as complicated as the last one. Yeah. And there are some things that can and should be improved. You can provide feedback to that process by sending emails to planner@danby.ny.gov. That's my email address. It will be the next planner's email address. That's a way to get your comments on the record. I encourage you again to go to the planning board agenda from last night, and you can get to the folder of all of the current materials we have, and that folder will also have all future materials. And I would guess we'll probably put a link on the planning department section of the website as well, which is what we did for the last big proposal.
Yeah, for the project that big.
Yeah. Sorry, that was not 30 seconds.
No. Okay.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Thanks.
His name is not
Catherine
recorded.
has another 30 seconds.
And finish his report. His name isn't on here for report.
No, because it does it at the other meeting. Or the first meeting. We reported last one. We have we've got highway in the county, for the second meeting, but Dan Klein couldn't make it tonight.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Joel. It's hard to hear you.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Pat was wondering why we didn't have a planning report on the agenda, and I was explaining that it's once a month and it's at the first meeting normally. The other announcement is from Catherine about Spectrum and her interaction with them in broadband.
So I said that I would check into calling the various internet companies, Hafley, Spectrum, and can you not hear me, Kevin? Just curious. Yeah, I do it all the time. It helps me a lot. It directs the sound into my ears and I really need to do that. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't a signal that I wasn't. Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah.
Me too. Go right ahead. Put your hands up for me. Anyway, I did call Spectrum and spent most of a large part of a day on the phone, and I have not gotten to Hafley or Clarity Connect or anybody else, but in the process of it, I came up with a possible citizens action idea that I'm just floating out here. People can respond whichever way, whatever you think. Because as what happens with many of us when we call a company, depends who we talk to, what the answer we get. And that happened, like I got 3 different answers. I got shuffled around a lot, which is what happens. And but the one thing that seemed pretty consistent, and again, I'm going to use the wrong words because I don't remember exactly what the job of the person or the people is, but if anybody calls, this is what I really understood. If any one of us or all of us or loads of us have concern about internet and we start calling the companies individually, each time somebody calls, there's a record. The record stays alive for a year. The individual's request is assigned to an individual or a team who's supposed to go out and see what it would take to get internet to whatever person that is. So I was thinking that we could do something different, like when we have our meetings where we ask you to speak and we like to try to share ideas amongst each other. I thought maybe we could do something like that. We could put a notice out and then maybe I could provide phone numbers or whatever, or we could suggest that maybe we take 2 months time period and say, as many of you who are willing to spend, unfortunately, X number of minutes or hours on the phone to make this kind of request and just give your address, et cetera, and be squeaky wheels. So I thought when I call Hafley, if I find out a similar thing, and when I call anybody else, but I was just thinking it, so put it in your thoughts. And if you like that idea, you want to just drop me a little note and say, sounds like a plan, maybe we can figure out how to organize it so that it's sort of a deluge. That's all.
Do we have a map that shows where the different companies have current hookups?
We have the results of the survey that.
Okay, well, does that include?
Identifies where it is.
Does it identify what companies serve what roads?
Don't remember.
Well,
You can look.
and I thought,
because that would help. I mean,
Yes, it would.
if
You
you
have to know
knew
which
a
road.
neighborhood was near Hafley, where Hafley ended, I mean, if those people all called Hafley, I mean,
Yeah,
it
right.
would make a difference.
I'd like it if all people called all 3 of them or all 4 of them or whatever, just get on a mission.
Mhm.
But we can work on, I'll take all those ideas and I'd be happy to not have the charge of this, but because I take on things and then I think, what the hell's wrong with me? Sorry.
We're supposed
I
to
don't know,
briefly,
Kevin.
but,
I don't know. Would you, are you
Which was pavement,
clarity?
Oh,
Those are the only ones I know of right now, but of course, there's always the direct, but that's not the same thing. And Starlink or anything. I was thinking of the ones that are either cable or
they're
wired, yeah. And they're, because they are all around. For instance, I specifically mentioned one neighbor, and what they told me is that person hadn't called, the last time there was a request from that house was 2015. So I said that to the person, they said, really? And it's possible that time goes by so fast, we forget when we called them last. This I will say too, two different people said this. The amount of money was different, but they said this, and I don't know whether it's true, but they said, it would cost these horrible numbers, $16,000 to get it to go X number of feet to the person's house. And then they said, and we Spectrum pay the up to, and the first figure I heard was 8,000. The second time I heard a figure, it was 6,000. But two different people said they pay a part of it up front. I don't know whether that's true or not, and if it is, if a lot of people called and they were in the same neighborhood and there was some part, that might make a difference. So, but the way to do it is flood them.
and that's how we got the service extended in some areas.
Yeah.
Was because a bunch of people got together and then it made sense for them to
Right.
extend the lines for that many people.
Yeah.
I went around the section for 6 months and dropped 100 feet of cable on my own and whole different things, like every different person I talked to.
Right. That's why I think if nothing else, and again, I didn't want to be opening a big discussion about it. I just wanted to say that, you know, if it's possible, squeaky wheels sometimes get something that one person who spends a day on the phone or 6 months or whatever doesn't. It's the same thing. I mean, I've had enough experience with different things in my life that if more people say something, either they get really sick of us and they either say go away or they start saying maybe we better do something. And we can introduce the idea of competition. That's all. Yeah. Actually, Kevin is speaking about ideas about this, but maybe not. Maybe we can talk more. But he was suggesting ideas, but you're not on the record, so because you have to speak to the mic. But anyway, it was just an idea, and for me, it was something I think that's a little hopeful and a little nice thing for us to concentrate on when we're besieged with things that are hard. So that's all. You can write to me, send a little note. I'd be happy to see it. And I don't guarantee nothing, just the efforts.
Yeah.
That's all.
Is this mic working?
You probably need it closer, Joel. Just pull it closer.
Is that
Better.
better?
Yeah, it's got to be as close as you can stand to have it.
As close as I can stand to have it.
Like
indeed.
eat it
Yeah.
while you're talking. Yeah.
Okay. Dan Klein cannot be here this evening, and I don't see Keith present either. So the next thing up is interviewing our two people who have applied to fill the vacancy on the town board, Kevin Feeney and Paul Hansen. And should we take them in that order? Both are here.
Sure.
So Kevin, if you would.
If I can stand up long enough. And I'd be happy to help you offline with stuff that I know
Okay.
and some contacts that I have.
Okay. Do you want to share? Do you want to?
I wouldn't mind that because I have a need that's not so.
Here, take a chair and pull it. Yeah.
I don't know where the camera is, whether I'm being seen by anybody or not, so.
That's it.
Oh, it's over there, okay.
But it's a,
So, having already disagreed with you this evening on the clerk issue, how can I shoot myself in the other foot?
Could you have two?
we'll give you plenty of opportunity.
I'm sure. So how can I help?
Why are you interested in being on the town board?
Because I've lived here for about 30 years. I lived at 375 Gunderman for a long time, and now I live at 365 Gunderman. I've been in the Ithaca area since 1982, sometimes further south, sometimes up a little further north. So I've been a denizen of the area for about 40 years, and most of the time busy doing other things, busy at Cornell, and I find that I'm getting more interested in the local issues. I'm getting to know my neighbors more. We talk about things, and I've been coming to board meetings and other meetings for about 3.5, 4 years now. Been writing to the board on a regular basis, and I've been watching the sausage get made, and everybody has different spices. Maybe it's time for me to contribute some of mine.
I have a list.
You have a list, yeah.
I don't know.
Thank you.
Could you describe your understanding of what the duties of a town board member are?
I think the primary duty is to represent the constituents. So there's about 2,000, 2,500 voters in town, about 3,400 residents, 54 square miles. And we encompass a pretty broad thing from near city up in the northern end of the town to very wild country down the southern end of the town. And I think that the board member's job is to be tapped into what the constituents are looking for, what they're not looking for, and to represent that as fairly as possible, subject to their own lens that they see the world through and their own set of experience. So, you know, I'm an engineer by trade. I've been solving problems for 45 years for a variety of entities. That would be, you know, my goal is to my tasks were often to try to figure out what was the problem that they actually wanted solved. I was the guy they would send out to go talk to the customer. It's like, what do you really want us to do? And then come back and formulate a document that would say, okay, here's what they want. Here's the possible set of solutions that we have. What are our constraints? Go from there.
Do you have any thoughts about town board functioning or changes that you'd like to see?
I'd like to see the town board be more interactive. You know, we have people interacting via Zoom, people interacting here, and there's the 3-minute rule. Where'd the 3-minute rule come from? When we used to do some of the planning stuff back when we were talking about the tax abatement, you know, the conservation easement stuff, we had long discussions that kind of went until there was consensus. And now it seems to be, you know, kind of shields up, you know, okay, we have to open the gates to let some comments in, but then shields up after 3 minutes. And, you know, we don't necessarily want to have as much give and take. We had some meetings a while ago where there was more give and take, and then they went sort of back to more closed meetings, more controlled meetings. I like beating things to death until you come to consensus. I like people to all buy in to what the solution is. Sometimes you can't find a solution, and so you don't move forward on things. But if you don't have everybody buying in a certain relatively large subset, 15, 20%, 30% of the people are not on board with it, why is it being forced forward? That's a pretty substantial number of people. If you're talking about 2,500 voters, 30% of them is like 700, 800 people who are not on board. Now, democracy sort of is majority rule, kind of, but we're not exactly a strict democracy. And so, you know, I think you need to listen, I would say just listen more. So what I hear from a lot of people is that they feel like they're not being heard. The people I talk to in the community, my neighbors, stuff like that.
To answer your question, we are bound by our own rules of procedure,
right?
Which were adopted 22, I think. In part, or in an effort to constrain the non-business parts of the meeting so that we can actually get through the business, because I mean, we're just now getting to the, you know, we're an hour and almost 3/4 into a meeting that was supposed to end at 8.
Right. And you have a lot more to go on the test.
That's why we shouldn't be talking too much.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, the thing is that, you know, the model that people always talk about, you know, the town meeting or whatever, is a very interactive process where people have a lot of input with their neighbors. You're our neighbors. You know, I live close to several of you. You're 1,000 feet through the woods. You know, it's the rules that have been adopted, I think, tend to constrain that too much for my taste.
Well,
And
I'll say it for mine as well, but.
yeah, so,
We
you
just
know,
hear the
Yeah.
interview.
okay,
We're not interviewing you, Joel.
right.
Right.
But, you know, moving things ahead to get things done, rushing to a bad decision that's not well informed, in my opinion, is not necessarily the way to go. I need a third foot, don't I? I need a third foot to shoot now,
Yeah.
don't I?
Well, you know,
Can we are gonna do the interview?
I was gonna ask.
How,
Okay.
could you describe your experience being a member of a team or group charged with making recommendations or decisions that have the potential to impact many people?
Sure. When I worked at Cornell, I was part of the network engineering team. My projects were originally the video conferencing systems for the Board of Trustees. So I spent a number of years going back and forth to New York City and sitting in board meetings and things like that, telling vice presidents of Cornell that no, it can't do what you want it to do, which is not always a happy thing to do, or telling various professors, no, this isn't going to be able to do that either. Later on, we got involved in wireless networking. We went from 0 to, when I left, there were 7,000 wireless access points, 25,000 customers, 62,000 connected devices at a given time. And so the decisions that I made impacted the entire campus. You know, I'm sorry, but you guys in the nuclear lab, yes, all your laptops are connected, but no, I can't make it work Pandora and you're on your phone because your phone doesn't have a good enough radio. So a lot of times I was out there in the trenches, you know, dealing with customers and large numbers of people that my decisions impacted directly.
Let's see, we all have things that are important to us as individuals that end up impacting how we approach town issues. Could you briefly describe some things that are important to you?
Well, there's a certain tension between, you know, property owners' rights and the needs of the town. And there's always going to be a tension with that. And I would say that's one of the primary things that, you know, motivates me is I've watched, you know, some of the decisions made and I'm not necessarily agree with them. And so I would like to bring another viewpoint to that to help inform the board. You know, I've tried to do that with, you know, letters to the board and by showing up in meetings and speaking in privilege and whatnot. This would be a way of maybe being, you know, a little more into that system. Let's see what else. You know, in terms of networking and things like that, you know, I can bring some direct knowledge of that. I worked in that for 30 years. And I have various experiences with various contacts within the community that might be useful.
Does anybody else have any questions? You want me to just keep going?
Well, I tried to ask one, but then I kind of like, you know, we were thinking maybe should get through all Leslie's first.
No, I mean, you don't even have to go through all of them.
We can do it round robin.
Yeah, right. One of the
The questions can't be real long.
yeah, short question. One of the problems I perceived is that when people come to us with issues, they sometimes believe that they represent the most of the population of the town of Danby, and you know, it's hard to it's hard to deal with them in a way that acknowledges that they might be right, but they might also not.
Sure, and you are sitting in a position, in the center of the spider web, where you have much more input on that via all the lines of communication that flow to you.
Yeah. So my question is, how do you think that issue should be approached by board members?
Like I said, listen and provide opportunities. I mean, it will slow things down. I mean, if you do listening, if you do outreach, if you find various ways to put your ear to the ground, hold more meetings, yes, it's going to slow things down, but you're going to get better data. And having good data to make good decisions on, I think, is prime to the process. As they say, bad data is worse than no data. If you only have part of the picture, then you're not going to make very good decisions.
Absolutely.
What skills do you have which might be helpful to the board?
I'm reasonably good at mediating between people. I spent a lot of time living in group households in the early years of my post-college experience, living in households of 5, 10, 14 people. I usually ended up being
like a commune?
Yeah, sort of. It was, that's one of the reasons I moved to Ithaca originally, is I heard there were communes down here. So that sounded cool to me. And I found that I would often end up in the position of the house mediator around the kitchen table, because I could listen to various people and bring the information together. I can, reasonably disagree with people without being disagreeable, I believe. I've had, conflicts in engineering things where we had, customers and, managers and engineers all, fussing around the same thing. And how do you blend together the requirements within the constraints of, what can be afforded, what we can do for time, how soon we can deliver it, what the customer really wants, what are the prime things that the customer needs. I've ended up doing a lot of that kind of decision making. I've also done, some executive decision making and various other things where it's just been me, and I've had to decide, hey, get out of the airplane, the engine just blew up, things like that, or, we've got a boat problem, everybody get your life jackets on, because I'm in charge in those cases. So I can operate as a single, decision maker, or I can operate as part of a consensus team. And I've worked on some pretty big projects, multi-million-dollar projects for some pretty big companies besides Cornell, General Electric, NCR, folks like that.
That's a broader question. What do you think is an appropriate role for government in land use?
I think it needs to tread lightly. I think that there are, definitely requirements, and some of them are imposed from above. I mean, there are federal requirements that get pushed down. There are state requirements that get pushed down. But I think that the town is where the rubber meets the road. And I think, as much as anything, I want the town to be an advocate for its constituents. And if the town if the constituents don't want to do what the state's pushing down, then I think the town should act as a buffer. Like I said, I think you should tread lightly.
I mean, most land use decisions are made at the local level.
Mm-hmm. But some of them are driven by constraints from above.
Well, the context is created by the state.
Right.
So,
So at least twice you've mentioned advocate for constituents.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just, how do you, I mean, I assume that everybody up here hopes that they're doing that.
I think so too.
So how, people are different.
Of course.
So how would you advocate for constituents if it's not a unified group that all agrees? How do you propose to?
Well, I think if you have a diverse group where you've got people with different viewpoints coming in, everybody's going to have different people talking in their ear. I've got, dozens of people who are talking to me, and, you know, expressing their desires and, you know, their disappointments and whatnot. And I'm sure you all do too. And the problem, you know, what you want to do is you want to bring all of that to the stew that is the decision-making process of a board. And you're going to have, you know, I would not expect a monoculture on the board where everybody agrees with everybody else. I expect that there will be a tension on the board that is drawn, you know, by everybody's life experiences and the communities that everybody is plugged into that are different around the town. And, you know, some people will be more rural maybe, and some people will be more urban. Some people will have more ties to agriculture. Some people will have more ties to business. You know, it will be a mix. And the whole point of it is to have, you know, the ability to talk to each other, to share the viewpoints and hammer out what are potential solutions. And maybe sometimes there aren't solutions.
I think, you know, no action is action in some respects.
No action is action, and sometimes that's appropriate.
Yeah, the trick is deciding when.
That's true.
Yeah.
You know, you guys are all sitting in the hot seat, so, you know, all of it lands in your laps, and you're always going to end up making people unhappy. So if I get to join you, I'll be making up people unhappy too.
You don't always make everybody.
You cannot always make everybody happy. What you try not to do is make everybody unhappy.
Unhappy all the time.
Right.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I have a question sort of in response to some of what you said, and and it goes along with the you can't make everybody happy all the time thing. And I know that my experience is there's many of us with strong opinions. So in what you were saying about working and trying to work together, what would you do, or what do you do when you find yourself in a situation where your wish for what you think should happen is met with other people whose wish is opposite of what yours is? And because I have found being on the town board is not something, it's so simple as that we listen to several people that show up, and there's many people who don't, many people who only speak very quietly because of whatever is going on for them. And so that we really don't know what, just because we hear from some people, we don't really know what happens. So my opinion has had to be, I mean, I've been faced with having to change my mind here and there, and have had to be ask questions of other people in the town government, you know, like ask highway questions about how come I don't know what's going on, how does this work, or ask the planner or the code person, and learn things that I thought maybe I had a strong reason for, that I was wrong, or that my opinion was able to be changed. What goes along with that is the ire that we sometimes receive. And when you receive it, how do you do those things? What do you do when you find that your ideas are strong one way and you're met up with somebody else's who are strong the other way?
I mean, that's kind of the normal experience of life, isn't it? I mean, we all run around and bump into people who are, you know, have a different opinion on things. Mostly, you know, in my day-to-day operations, you can have your opinion, I'll have my opinion. You know, I'm not trying to make you do something. You're not trying to make me do something. So I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but in the town, we do.
The board, you are having to come to decisions that affect people.
Right.
And so I think the first thing you have to do is you have to listen and understand what the person's concerns are. I mean, you and I have been working together recently a bit, and, you know, we come to things from a somewhat different direction, but I think we've both found that we can listen to each other and learn from each other. And if you found that I'm impervious to that, say so. But I think your experience with me has been that I do listen and I do pay attention. And I do, incorporate what I learn from other people into my decision-making process.
Okay.
Is he off the hot seat?
Could be.
I haven't bled out yet from my foot wounds.
I want him to fall asleep.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm not.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you for your consideration.
I gotta get the same question.
I'm gonna try.
You're gonna get the same opportunity to sit down too. Like,
Oh. Why are you interested in being on the board?
Well,
you have to hold the microphone
right up to your face.
Yeah.
about 4 or 5 inches, yeah.
Okay. So, I used to work for the town of Danby, and I also worked for the town of Ithaca years and years ago. I got to watch the board in action over the 4 or 5 years that I was here. So there's an intervening 4 years since then, and I have worked hard getting projects done of my own, but I'm now getting older. And this is my community. And I thought it was time, well, you guys stepped it up a little bit. But I thought it was time to do something, as I had been thinking about running for the board before, but I thought it was time to get more engaged. I think that's pretty much the answer.
I hope I don't leave out one of the questions I asked Kevin. Could you describe your understanding of what the duties of a town board member are?
You realize, of course, you guys got me engaged with this only within the last month. So, I mean, I'm kind of running on what I observed over the last, the 4 years that I was working here. And, I saw, fiscal decisions. I saw meetings where it was that you were listening to the constituents tell their ideas about how the town should work. I saw a lot of the people who were serving on a number of different boards who would come to the planner to find out what is possible and how the town works and what is mandated or other what programs are available through other agencies. And, that's, I think a large part of it is first learning how the system works. And I think another thing is to figure out what I don't feel like the board has that much room a lot of times to make decisions that's going to actually change things. And so finding the avenues for things to improve or to change are narrow. So that's why I think that it's really, really important to figure out how the system works and listen to not just the board members that have been here longer, but also to the representatives that come in from planning, but also the state and federal governments. There are a lot of programs out there that taught us what we can and can't do.
Do you have any thoughts about town board functioning or changes that you would like to see?
I haven't seen this board function, so I don't know.
That means it would dysfunction over.
I've had cancer, so there was a lot of time in there that I just wasn't engaged. And since, Rick was the superintendent or supervisor at that time, you were still here. The other board members are new. So I think that there's a dynamic that looks like you guys work well together, and I hope to continue that. But being open, I think, is the biggest part of all of every single question. I think Kevin was is that correct, Kevin? Was very articulate. He's a powerfully well-spoken, wonderfully endowed person. And but the point is that we have to listen to each other and we have to listen to the constituents, and I'll get back to that same theme again. And I think that's something that I'm really good at. And I like to think that, you know, once I listen to people, I can collate that information into something that works for everybody. I mean, and hopefully that people will understand at the end of the conversation that, you know, that we have done the best we could to include their input into any of the decisions that we make.
Could you describe your experience being a member of a team or group charged with making recommendations or decisions that have the potential to impact many people?
You know, yes, no. I was going to, Catherine's stuck with that really terrible job of dealing with the cable companies and trying to get them to extend their lines. It's so tough. And I did the same thing 4 years ago, and, you know, got pretty much stonewalled in the same kind of way that you're getting stonewalled. You know, I personally, there's a success here in getting Time Warner to bring cable up, well, further up Comfort Road, and that was Ted. So I would have asked him what he's done to make that happen. I don't know what squeaky wheel he's greased to make that happen, but he's a resource in this regard. Because I was told time and time again that it's a financial decision, that there's not enough people along any given line to pay for that. I don't know if there's been any extensions. I mean, Kathleen wasn't even willing to come out and do anything over there because they're coming up from the south. Time Warner is inching its way through the town of Danby, and that
Clarity has done some,
Clarity is also,
they've done some.
yeah. Well, anyway, so in that period of time, sounds like there's been some success, but it's so difficult because they'll back you up.
Follow up, or you're going to keep going?
What skills do you have which might be helpful to the town?
I guess it's really the listening skills. I did spend some time as a counselor, and I worked really hard to do that. It's a situation where you have to really listen well to people to find out what's going on with them and find ways in which they feel listened to, number one. But secondly, so that there's some avenue for them to move forward. And I think that's a really important skill. It's not so much me. It's not about me. You know, it's not me telling you what my opinion is. It's really about finding out what the other people are, the concerns are. And then being able to put it together for them and feed it back to them so we clearly understand the other. You can't do that without really finding out what it is that they're really concerned about. And if you can't state what their opinion is or their feelings are or what's driving their decisions, then you can't help them understand the next step or to be able to do the next step yourself.
You have a couple questions, Joel.
I'm trying to remember there were. One was the
Representing large. They think you're representing a large constituent.
yeah, I mean, there are hard cases, well, not uncommon, actually. People have strong opinions, and they believe that they represent, you know, a large group of people, maybe even the majority of people. And so when you don't immediately accede to the, you know, the point or whatever that they're making, they feel like they're being ignored. How do you handle that kind of a, I'm gonna call it a misconception, but you know, that everybody's belief that, you know, that everybody's behind them, so to speak.
Well, again, you back to the listening part. You nearly need to figure out what it is that they're actually saying to find out what it is. You can't come in with a preconception about what it is that they might be telling you. Some of it's information. I mean, but I think before that, there's an underlying emotional content to what it is that's happening. So first, you got to get the content. You got to find out what it is that they're actually saying. Even if you think that you have the information that contradicts that, you have to be patient enough to also figure out what it is that is driving it for them. They have, you know, behind any kind of informational piece, it's going to be a lot of concerns and ideals and beliefs, and all those things come into this thing, which has ended in a confrontation. It doesn't begin in a confrontational place, but it ended in a place where they feel as if they've been backed into a corner or aren't being listened to at the outset. The counterpoint, you know, once that some of that stuff is dealt with, because it has to be dealt with, it has to be, you have to be empathetic to what it is that they're saying to start with. But then there's information. So if their feelings are based on a misconception, whether it's the zoning ordinance or whatever else it is, that then once you establish some trust in the situation, then you can move on to like actually talking about what the information actually, the information that can be verified for them. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to listen to you.
Mm-hmm. I feel that in recent years, people tend to view through a certain lens, and they tend to hear and process information that's consistent with what they already believe. So it's called confirmation bias. That makes it really hard to have a dialogue where people try to come to agreement on what the proper path forward is. And it's really bad at the national level. It's bad enough at the state level, and it has come down to the local level, where these philosophical perspectives can make it difficult to have a you know, we'll call it unbiased, but you know, an intelligent and dispassionate discussion and you know, in conclusion about the proper an adequate path forward. You know, so
Can I say something first?
well, you can say something in response, because that's the whole point of this.
Okay, so
You were interviewing.
what you're saying is, well, first of all, it's tinged. The preconception that you're working under, or the set of parameters that you're talking about right now that is influencing you, is a huge geopolitical piece of information that's going on right now. But you got to disregard that. That can't be part of any of the discussion that you're talking about. The discussion has to be, or the conversation between you and these other parties need to start from a point of trying to understand what it is that they're saying first. I have two brothers, and they're at opposite extremes on each issue. And I love them both, and I listen to them both. They're totally different. And frankly, neither one of them really wanted me to tell them what the truth was. That's not the point. It's just not really what. So, you know, the first thing we have to do is hear the story. You got to hear the story first.
And then you can ask some questions to find out where it's coming from. And then you can find out, ask more questions until you find out more. And I'm not so sure that this is always the forum. This here is the forum for that kind of discussion. But I know that you get into these positions where people are riled up about a certain topic, and they need to be heard, regardless of where you think they're coming from, what their background is, or what their preconceptions are, or how wrong they might be on that thing. But you still have to hear what they're saying. I mean, that's what the board is the most necessary part for the board and within the community, is to listen to the constituents. I mean, when in my job here, I got along with all kinds of people, which is lovely. I mean, there was no complexion to any of the people that, they were all so different, and they come into the office needing so many different kinds of things. And it was great, like I got an education on what everybody was about and what they cared about in town. And, mostly it was about the projects that they were trying to build. And some of them had absolutely no skills or didn't know what they were doing. And I just kind of bent it a little bit and used everything I had that tried to answer the questions that they were asking. And I think that's what it's all about.
You asked a role about, your question, you asked a question about government role in land use.
Yeah, right. Do I have a preconception about what government's role is in land use? Yeah. That's a tough one, because I mean, I have personally used it. I got a variance to build up my house. We had 5 acres to start with, and I got a variance to split it. But that was through the zoning board, so that's a little different. So they're asking a different question, a bigger question. Well, yeah, but I mean, it's sort of, you guys set the guidelines in some ways to some of this stuff. You're changing policy or you're not paying policy. I've heard recently that some things have been changed since I was here, but I quickly looked at some of them to see what that requirement. And I think your answer about one of them, but there was a requirement for 10 acres to build on something or other like that. I heard that one. And I said, oh, really? Wow. Let me find out about that. Let me see what the real rule is. Let's see if that rule is really a rule now, because I'm 4 years out of date. And I know that in some areas, the rules are different. There's zones and different zones that exist and all that kind of stuff. But, like, okay, let me see what I can do. I'll see if I can find out. So let's get back to the question again. What was the question again?
Well, I mean, it's
preconception about land use. No,
it's not done by preconception. It's just,
if the government has a role in land use.
yeah, what do you believe is an appropriate role for government in land use decisions?
Wow. It's funny, like I'm retired now and I walk all over the place. And I don't know how much of the land that I walk on is public and how much is private. My neighbor has really been great about us walking straight up behind our house across the fields. And then we get into there is a preserve back there, and there's another walk that I can go on. If he ever said no, then I'd have to figure out something else. We have to get in the car and go around the circle and come around to the other one, but they have the right to do that. I would love to see more walkways around town, but again, there's a private concern that has to be addressed. And I think at this point, it's really unrealistic to think that you can create a green belt, for example, around the town, although it sounds wonderful. Does the town have a role in that? I think maybe the role is that they bring it up occasionally, just so that there's an idea that's just floated out there. And that if,
is there a role in land use? Do I believe there should be some kind of zoning? Yeah, I remember this in high school, that, you know, if the guy parks 6 cars in his driveway and, you know, thinks that that's okay and has loud parties and that kind of thing, do you do something about it? Can the town legislate in some way about stuff like that? Well, we have a junk car rule, and the poor woman here, I think, got misused. I mean, she didn't get a proper hearing for that for whatever reason, the building inspector didn't go out and take a look and then use the laws that are in place to try to help her out and get the right thing done by that. And, you know, it seems selective almost that wouldn't happen. Either that or he's overworked, and we need to solve that dilemma so that the person has enough time to actually do this stuff. So. Does that answer your question? I beat it around the bush. The government has a role, but you have to deal with your local population in order to set the rules. And there needs to be some kind of consensus. And if you're going to go to the next step and ask, what do you do if you don't have consensus? I would say that you're barking up the wrong tree. I think you need to convince the community first, and then do something about it, if that's the case. I mean, you'd have to do really a broad educational thing throughout Danby. And again, it says the same thing that Kevin said, is that you really need to talk to a lot of people who might be resistant to that idea, whatever it is that's not working. Oh. Do you have a question?
We all have things that are important to us as individuals, and that ends up impacting how we approach town issues. Could you briefly describe some things that are important to you?
Who are you looking at?
Walking. Walking through somebody else's property.
All right. I think a lot has to do with neighbors, you know, how my neighbors feel about stuff. I think that's really, really important to me. I think that the community, the sense of community and having trust with your neighbors would be really important. I mean, I can't say that I wouldn't be someone who speak up to say that this is what I think is the right idea. But I realize that, you know, not everyone agrees with me, and that, you know, I think if you're thinking in terms of change, things changing here in Danby, I mean, a change happens regardless, but it's incremental. I mean, I don't think that we're changing at any really fast pace. And I've watched, even those 4 years I was here, that people suggested things that would come up and then it would go back down, and you would suggest them go back, you know, and it just, which is the nature of politics. It just doesn't, I don't think it moves that quickly. And I think it's when you try to move it too fast that you get into trouble. That I think you really have to step back to the educational part of anything, you know, make people understand why, and you may have to do it 1,000 times. But that also comes after you heard their story. And I know I didn't tell you exactly. I think you still wanted something else from me, but I'm not sure that that's. I'm trying to be as honest as I can.
Yeah, this is all about you answer your answers, not what you think we want to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the whole point of this.
And Catherine, you had a question about.
Yeah, my question.
Changing your mind.
Yeah, what happens when you find yourself in a situation where you could be surprised that other ideas are totally contrary, and you're faced with what to do in those circumstances? That's sort of what I asked.
Something about, yeah, contrary, Kevin.
wants
Give me-
wants to remember what the question was
Yeah,
that Catherine asked.
I wrote that
You're
down.
confronted with someone who's doesn't agree with that, in
Well-
a very not so
Yeah.
nice way, perhaps.
Correct, or you, yes, and yeah. And I think you answered that question earlier because you
Yeah,
said
somewhat, yeah.
not to start in confrontation, to be empathetic, gathering. That's what you said earlier, so.
I think that's the issue first, is that, first of all, as a person who's on the board, I mean, even as a private person, I think this is true. You don't, if someone comes at you aggressively, then I mean, the thing is to diffuse the situation. The only way to diffuse the situation is to talk to them about what their point is. And then usually, I mean, this is classic, that just listening and repeating back to what they're saying helps you, first of all, understand what they're saying, but secondly, they start to feel heard, and which is a big part of it. I mean, it's just, this is family discussion stuff, right? One end of the spectrum and then the other end of the spectrum, and they don't agree. And yet we seem to work out being able to have really close ties.
Yeah, my family mirrors yours, yeah.
My family, yeah, in particular, and
You got two brothers, I have a brother and a sister. Same family dynamic, though.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
No. We asked all the same
Okay,
questions.
yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank both of you for putting up with our long questions.
The most thorough interview I think you've ever conducted. We are past our authorized time.
Not the public hearing.
What's that?
We could take
Not
away-
to have the public hearing. Yeah, they did notice when the public hearing.
There and Alan.
Okay.
We started the meeting at 7:01.
I'm sorry, say again?
The meeting, the regular town board meeting started at 7:01.
Oh, good. Good, so we have a little more time, yeah. Thank you for that. All right.
If you're done with the interviews, I do have a question, if you will allow it, because several residents contacted the clerk's office.
Uh-huh. A question of the board or?
Yeah, about the vacancy that you just had interviews for.
That's later in the, it's later in the agenda.
Right, I mean, if you don't mind, we could add it to the discussion when we get to it.
Sure, that's fine. I'll make a note. Thanks.
Let's see, minutes. Yeah. Take a few minutes on minutes.
Not after an hour, we should get right to the warrants to make sure they get paid.
Oh, want to do the warrants first?
Yeah.
Well, are we gonna skip the minutes again?
No,
Yeah, she just
no.
said first, do the warrants right, so we can do that, and the highway spending, so if there are people that are.
There's quite a few items of business, all
You know, but
all of
those-
which are important.
Yeah, but they're waiting
Yeah.
about money.
I'd like to move the general fund. Voucher.
Well, we have an issue with the general fund because we start by moving it and then we discuss it.
Okay, general fund vouchers 223 through 242 for 24,954.79.
Did you say through 242? 243.
It's 243.
Oh, something was added?
Oh, I have 243 on mine.
I got
Did you say
242 on
3
mine,
or
which is
2?
Is 243 the key to business credit card?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry,
243.
that's my mistake on the agenda. It should be 243. You're right, Pat.
243, sorry.
And what was the amount? Because
$24,954.79.
do we have a second?
second,
Okay, now discussion. The seniors submitted a voucher that, a request for payment that exceeds the amount that is in the budget for their line by $285.91. You recall several meetings ago, they requested additional funding.
Right.
And we responded with please give us more information about, how much you'd like and for what. But we haven't gotten that from them. And in the meantime, they had this bus trip and they spent more than they have in their allocated, the $5,000 that we have in our budget for them. So the question is, what do we do about that? Because what do we do about that? We shouldn't be authorizing payment for which they do not have the appropriation.
Well, I also wondered, and maybe I read it wrong, but it looked like that was what's on the warrant, the $2,105.02 was for something that hasn't happened yet. That's what it looked like to me.
You mean if this is the trip that they haven't taken?
It said August 9th.
Oh, well, it's also the agreement that they will be reimbursed for expenses and not paid ahead of time.
Right.
So if they're asking us for prepay, that's not consistent with the agreement either.
I mean, I don't have access to that,
I don't have
to
it.
that, right, the voucher right here.
Yeah, I don't remember what it is. They mentioned
believe
on
that-
the,
Yeah, I can help with that. I believe that it was already paid for and they are submitting it for reimbursement because they paid for the bus in advance.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
So they made the expenditure even though the trip hasn't happened yet.
Correct.
it is to reimburse expenses made.
Yeah, okay. So that part's okay, but the request for reimbursement exceeds the appropriation.
Because of what we've already paid. I don't remember the
Yeah.
previous amounts.
Well, I asked Laura to check because there was a negative balance on their line. We put that in. And she confirmed that the request exceeds the appropriation by $285.91. So we have a couple of options. One, we could pay up to what was authorized. We could authorize a transfer from some other part of the budget, giving them more money than was in the budget, even though they haven't formally asked for a specific amount yet. Or some other option I might not have thought of. The only thing, I'm only raising this point because we can't just pay it because it's not,
Well, should we
it exceeds what they were
take
given in the
voucher
budget.
230 out and hope to clarify it?
I wouldn't do that because we get nothing. What makes more sense is to pay them up to the amount they've already gotten approved. And then we can deal with the extra amount afterwards.
Right with me.
Because we've already budgeted up to 5,000, so we shouldn't stop.
How much would that be?
It'd be $285.91 less than what they asked for.
The only
How
thing
much would total
you could do is if you wanted to make a transfer, if you wanted to, pay that extra $251, you could go and make a transfer from another line item. It doesn't look like we're going to be using just a suggestion, doesn't look like we're using everything in the pond program this year. We're having a problem getting lifeguards and being able to open up that facility. So if you feel that your goal is to go ahead and pay that, even though it went over, we could pass a resolution transferring from the pond account number into the senior citizens account. But once again, I'm just bringing that up, but I know you guys it's a matter of policy and what
We would first have to approve the expenditures period and then to approve where it comes from.
Well,
One of the things, since they asked for additional money in the past, and we've been waiting for details, they did give us some information, and we already know that they needed information. So one of the things we could do, table this motion right now, and then have another motion to approve an additional. $285 and whatever the hell it was.
Um,
I didn't write that part down.
right, we could do that.
I move that we do that.
Okay, so,
Wait, we're in discussion right now.
well, yeah, but what Pat request is that we withdraw the motion
Okay,
so that we can
Then
put
we-
money in
Yeah.
so we can transfer funds to in order to
right,
cover
got that. So do we have to do something, we just say we're withdrawing it, or
Well,
whose
that was
motion is it?
Leslie's motion, right?
Yeah, I can
You
withdraw.
okay,
the
withdraw
motion.
it? Okay, so
Okay.
to withdraw. So then, you're right, Pat. I mean, it's not like they didn't tell us they wanted more money.
Right. and
We didn't tell them that we wouldn't give them more money either. We did ask for, some indication of how much and for what. I guess this is sort of an indication of for what, because they
This
just,
must be it then.
we could see that as being, satisfying the request. And add the amount that's needed in order to pay that request, which is $285.91. As Laura suggested, we have had, unfortunately, no success in trying to get lifeguards for the pond program. It was close but no cigar. It's a tight market for lifeguards, and State Parks is paying $20 an hour. And I went all the way up to 17, but we still didn't get anybody. So we have some, so all the money that's in that budget is not going to be, so we could transfer from pond
Okay.
to cover this bill.
Well, for you guys, I'm just bringing this up because in the past, whenever we were doing this account analysis and you saw that that if you approved this, if you approved the abstract, it would be over budget. In the past, what we've done is pass the resolution before funding it with the $251. And then it's all funded, and then you can go ahead and approve the abstract. That's what
And
we've
that's
done.
exactly what we're,
That's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing now.
that's exactly what we're doing right now.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you were gonna withdraw it from the abstract and then approve the abstract and then go
I
ahead.
move that we increase, well, I can do it in two, okay, we can do it in one, right? I
Yeah.
move that we increase the senior budgets by $285.91 and take the money from the pond account.
Second.
Third.
Ready to vote?
Ready.
Okay. A vote, please, Janice.
Hang on one second. My fingers are slow tonight. Taken from the pond line. Okay, and Joel, you seconded, is that correct?
Correct.
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes,
Gagnon.
Yeah. Okay, now that money's there, you can vote the warrant.
Okay. I move the general fund, vouchers 223 to 243, or $24,954.79.
Second. Ready to vote? Yeah. Vote, please.
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth,
yes,
Gagnon.
Yeah.
I'll move highway fund vouchers 140 through 155 for $32,255.67.
second,
Any discussion? Vote?
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth,
yes,
Gagnon.
Yes.
I'll move water voucher 21 or $75.60.
second,
I thought you said 7.
second.
Ready to vote? Yes.
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes,
Gagnon.
Yes. Okay. You want to come back to this later?
Yes, we need to do the rest of the
At the
business
end of
first.
business? Okay,
That's important for everybody else sitting here.
sure it is. First up, local law implementing tax abatement for conservation easement properties.
I move we approve the local law.
You have to second that.
Did you just say you seconded? Okay.
Any discussion? We're ready to go vote.
Ready.
Yeah, ready.
Tax abatement, discussion.
How is it gonna, how is the town gonna decide how, what parameters they're gonna have?
Well,
Is that a planning board?
It was in the proposal. The proposal said that the planning board would come up with them
No,
and then.
CAC.
Okay, the CAC,
CAC,
sorry.
I'm sorry, yeah, no, it's
Decision-
right.
decision.
CAC would come
I
up with
remember.
those proposals and
I got
they would recommend to the town board, so the town board actually has to vote on each
Right.
one. And that there has to be a public benefit or something. I forgot
Right.
the word,
Yeah.
but a public benefit.
No, I remember now.
Okay. So, are you ready? Any other questions? Are you ready?
No,
Yes, okay. Janice?
So Woodworth moved and you seconded, Joel?
Yes.
Connors,
yes,
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes,
Gagnon.
Yes. Consider passing local law putting conversions from elected to appointed town clerk before the voters in November. I move we do so.
I'll second it.
I think it warrants some discussion.
Right. Yeah.
We heard, and most of the public comment tonight was why not? What's been missing is the why. I didn't bring that. Leslie created a very useful list of pros and cons. The pros have mostly been already stated. I mean, the cons rather. For me, I see an inherent difficulty in the way the law is structured, in that having an elected official answerable, when elected officials are essentially answerable only to the voters, makes it conflict prone relationship between different groups. Because you've got the town board, you've got the clerk, you have the highway superintendent, each of which answers to the voter, none of which answers necessarily to each other as an inherently conflict prone situation. Many is the town where there's a testy relationship between the board and the highway superintendent. And many is the town where there's a testy relationship between the board and the clerk. It works in some places, it doesn't work in other places. When it doesn't work, it's really hard to deal with. And we've been there before. And it's not obvious. Well, it's not obvious to me. It seems obvious to me that a position which is not policy making, but is a position that involves record keeping primarily and communication, this shouldn't be elected. And in our experience, working with the clerks, the clerk has a list of responsibilities by law, which he or she is responsible for doing. And the last of which is, and whatever else the town board asks you to do, that they're willing to pay for. But when the clerk, disagrees, doesn't want to do either their statutorily required duties or what the town board wants to ask them to do in addition, and takes a less than cooperative stance, the board has no good recourse. The only recourse available is for the voters to, in light of, it coming to light that there is, a lack of cooperation, to consider the possibility of electing somebody else to the office. That creates a need when there's a problem, and as we've had in the past. That creates a need to inform the voters about what the problems are in order for them to be able to make a judgment on the matter. That's not an easy task. It's easy, and not only is it not an easy task, it's an unpleasant task. Shining a light on what would otherwise be essentially a personnel matter that to be worked out between a supervisor and an employee. So, as an example, we've had discussions about, well, we need to do more about one thing or another, and it's a question: is the clerk willing to do it, or have the deputy clerk do it? Should we create another position to do it instead that would be answerable to the board? And the answer to that question depends on, well, how willing is the board to take it on? And if the clerk isn't willing, then we have a situation where we're adding staff and we're adding inefficiency by dividing up work, which I think rightfully belongs or could rightfully belong within the clerk's office as the primary means of communicating with the public and keeping track of the records, both public and private. The other part of it is maybe that's enough talking about the subject. There's more. Janice and I have a pretty decent working relationship. That's not the issue, and this particular clerk is not even the issue for me. It's the whole framework that is does not promote a cooperative environment. You're entirely dependent on good relationships between the clerk, the highway superintendent, and the board, and in fixing problems when they develop is really hard to do. All the cities in New York State and all the villages in New York State have gone from elected to appointed, and quite a few towns have done so also. The argument that there needs to be some sort of independence on the part of the clerk in order to maintain transparency or independence. It seems to me that if that argument had weight, it would be even more applicable in a larger municipality than a smaller one, because of the opportunities for people for the activities of the office to be opaque are much higher as the municipality grows in size. But the duties of the office have expanded greatly since the office was first conceived, and the fact that there's no requirement legally to be a clerk apart from being a resident of the town and over 18. We'll leave it entirely up to the voters just to make the judgment about whether or not somebody is adequate to the purpose. And then it's up to the voters to try to perceive whether or not they are. Which I frankly don't think, most voters are not in a position to know. So.
I'm not just talking about the last year or two, but in all the years, I've never had anybody ask me how I thought the clerk was doing. Or, how are the records, how are the minutes, people who come to meetings sometimes get an idea if something's brought up, but it's uncomfortable bringing up issues in public. It's not comfortable for me anyway.
And because it's an elective office, it's the only way to do it. You wanted to contribute to this, Janice, I'd be happy to have you do so.
Thanks. I just wanted to mention that it is true that the town law states that the board can confer additional duties, such further duties as the town board may determine, not inconsistent with law. And I think that that's an important distinction, right? Because I think you and I, and we've talked about this a lot, like you and I do have a very good working relationship. And prior to, I don't know, 10, 11 months ago, I had a great working relationship with the rest of the board. And what I think is fishy is not the right word, but concerning is that nothing in my way of working has changed. I have always been open to assisting in whatever way I can, to, you know, working with the newsletter, to disseminating information through email campaigns, to updating the website. All of that was stuff that was put upon me that I happily accepted as information officer, records manager, all of my work to increase the ability for people to access public records has been in concert with you and the board. So where I see the breakdown occurring is in maybe one mistake I had, which was brought to the public by other elected officials who called me out on particular behavior that was internal, was a collegial working relationship that deteriorated rapidly. And then there was a power differential between the board and the clerk. I'm gonna turn my camera on so that maybe that makes people feel better. So this power differential seems to be advancing this idea that the clerk should be working for the board, which I do, but I don't work for you, I work with you. And the extent to which I am able to come to you and say, hey, this happened, I'm experiencing these feelings. And the response I get from you as board members is, oh, that's ridiculous. Oh, that's so childish. Oh, I can't believe you would think that, which is very demeaning, very belittling, and just not helpful. So the ability to, you know, work through personnel conflicts is a two-way street. And it has been incredibly one-sided. And to the extent that people think of the town clerk as an admin clerical position is, you know, outdated. It is not in fact true. And that, I believe, is what is leading to a lot of the issues that, whether or not the board admits to having issues with me personally, which I think we can all admit based on previous meetings, seems to be the case, or not, there is a power differential that the board is imposing on a fellow colleague. We are all here to work for the town residents. I am here to work for the town residents. I interact with them on a daily basis. I love interacting with them. It's like, I mean, I can't even describe how much fun I have when people come to the window, even when they're pissed off. I can talk to them and hear what they're saying. And yeah, it's not a political position. It doesn't have to be Democrat, Republican, but the way our system is set up is such that an elected position has to go through a political party, right? So those are the issues as I see them. And again, it goes back to this idea that good management is not hierarchical. When we're all working for the town, we are all working for the town, and personality conflicts can be worked through. But as I've been trying to work through them with the board, I have been consistently beat down, vilified, you know, belittled, everything under the sun. So yeah. Thanks for letting me say that. I appreciate it.
Well, another thing I'd like to add to the discussion is it's not everyone who would be qualified for and interested in serving in this position who has the the stomach, if you will, to go through the political process of getting elected. And that, in my mind, that's another reason why we better serve with an appointed than an elected. Further discussion.
I actually don't have, I have feelings about and ideas about how things work and, how things might work better and I actually haven't made up my mind how I would vote, but I think having the residents vote to say whether, they want to have it changed or not is the thing that we should do. I mean, everybody will have a vote and they can tell us, the residents can say,
Your argument is convincing or not.
yeah, well, with voting, you don't have to have a convincing argument. You have an idea and you have a feeling and you vote. And residents can do that. So I actually think I'd be in favor of pushing it through so that people can vote in November.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Why not let the people say what, if we're hearing it from the people, then we'll hear it it'll be that way on the ballot. I think that it's really unfortunate that it keeps being referred to as the board's problem with the current clerk and I think this is a very unfortunate thing, which is why for a little while we backed off and said, forget it, we're not going to do it. We'll just not put it to the people. And the people keep saying, put it to us. And we're saying, yeah, we'd like to put it to you. And the people are saying, we're hearing some people say, no, don't. So, this is how you put it to the people. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
I'm very saddened and stressed out by this reference, the constant reference to our behavior towards Janice in this case, because Janice brought that up. But I don't think that this is about, it's unfortunate because what the town board has also been subjected to by people's opinions, that it's all on us, that there's a problem. So that doesn't come out, but that we've certainly been told this is all your fault. So there are strong opinions all around, but in the case of this, at this point, having the opportunity for a person to see a job opening, look at all the requirements, decide whether that's something they might want to do or not, I think it's nice for a wide range of people to have that opportunity. I mean, one person who hasn't been involved at all in anything was reading the newsletter article and looked at me and said, well, why isn't it an appointed job? It doesn't make any sense for it to be. So, and I was just like, oh, wasn't expecting the comment either way, and it came out. So. Blah, blah, blah.
I mean,
The people asked for it to go to the people, let this go to the people and let them go.
I'm opposed.
Opposed to having it go to the people. Okay, there's one.
I'm opposed to bringing it up because, as several people have mentioned, when you have something that's controversial, the best thing is to spend time and get information and then get all the information you can, then provide information back. We have not done that by a long shot.
I don't understand what you're saying. We have
I feel like we have until we have some months to.
That is not very long to communicate with people, get back when we know it's a controversial to start with. I prefer taking time to do it carefully and not now.
If I could just add one last comment.
What's that?
If I could just add one last comment.
Sure, why not?
Why not? You know, I'm not trying to say that the board is at fault. I have made mistakes. I own all my mistakes. You know, some of them I think are necessary. Some of them maybe I overstepped, but I think that the issue now with it coming down to, it looks like it's the board versus the current clerk, is because, you know, the entire board, the Danby Democrats, refused to support my candidacy for re-election. The Danby Democrats did all they could to find a candidate to run against me. The Tompkins County Democratic Committee, after Mariah withdrew from the election, stated on their website that Danby was not having a primary because the challenger or the other candidate or whatever, Mariah Dillon, withdrew from the race. So there is a lot of misinformation, and there is a lot of evidence to suggest that the town board, the Danby Town Board, is actively trying to get me out of office. So, you know, we can talk about how it's not a personal issue between me and you, but every action that has occurred would suggest otherwise. Whether or not we agree or disagree is sort of irrelevant, but those are the facts.
Well, what you're saying is correct, but it doesn't affect this decision, because whether or not the position is made appointive would have no bearing on your future occupancy of the position. In fact, it might be said that if the voters agreed to have it be appointed instead of elected, you'd have a shot at it. Because if it remains elected, and Mariah accepts the position, she becomes the clerk. It's only if after elected, assuming she is elected, only after election that she can decline the position when it comes time to take office. In which case, the board gets to appoint an interim for the position anyway. So either way, the next clerk will be appointed. Yeah, if Mariah doesn't take a position,
Right.
So that it wouldn't affect the this proposal being voted down by the voters. Keeping the position elected would not change who occupies the office in January.
I agree with that, given the results of the primary. However, the process of proposing this change has its basis in a personnel conflict, regardless of how you frame it. If you look at the actions that
there's some truth to that, because but there's also a huge volume of additional information that points to this having been a problem that pre-existed you by a long time. It's not all about you. It's not. I can't say that it's not about you at all, but I would say it's mostly not about you.
I thought this is where you were going, and maybe you were, and I didn't hear you, but if it ends up being that the residents decide they want it to be appointed, Janice could apply.
Right, I did say that.
Oh, I didn't hear you.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Part of that misconception is the fact that we have not been careful in taking the time, explain the details over time where it can sink in and people have a chance to reflect on it.
Mm-hmm. And I disagree. I think, I agree with you that not enough has been said about it yet. But I think that there's enough time to, have a thorough discussion of the issue between now and November. Are we ready? Yes, we're ready for vote.
Alrighty. Connors,
Yes,
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth,
No,
Gagnon. I'm sorry, Gagnon again?
Yes,
Thank you.
okay. Ted suggested we should have, not do the executive session because it
yeah,
moved to
that
the end.
makes sense.
It does, except I don't expect it to take very long.
Well, let's,
it doesn't matter. They're
But
still figuring
people are-
doing nothing in the meantime.
yeah, people are waiting and Laura's still sleeping out there. I don't think she still feels very well.
I'm
Okay,
right,
when you-
I'm right here.
It's still there. Yeah.
I'm just patiently
You
waiting
woke her
for
up.
the agreement to spend funds for the highway.
Yeah, you have to hang in there, getting there. I think we probably defer the next item.
Yeah.
I keep losing my.
What do we
agenda.
defer?
We're tabling the updates on notice and short-term rentals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
All right, the next item is the potential appointment to fill a vacancy.
Where are we?
We're at 10.5.
Okay.
We had 2 interviews. We could make the appointment now, or we could not, as you wish.
I'm
This was
opposed
where I
to the
had some
appointment now because we
Next
did
meeting?
not approve in advance by the board the deadline. It was supposed to come before the board and did not.
so what?
The deadline
We
for
did.
the,
We promulgated the
Oh.
deadline for application and announced the process without having actually talked about it,
Huh.
except in
Well, I
a
mean, I don't,
general way.
I don't mind. I usually like to check a few references myself. I don't know if anybody else is interested. I usually do. I did it for David. But, you want to make the decision at the next meeting?
I would rather be sure that if we allow it, that we should choose now to allow it to be open for other people to come to apply as well, since the deadline, the time for deadline to apply was not set by the board. It was supposed to be.
Well, it need not have been though. Which is why we went ahead and did it.
But when you
Oh.
talked to me and suggested I put it in the newsletter, what you said was, we can put this in tentatively now and it will be, we would discuss it and then approve it at the next board meeting. If not, we can change it later on.
Right now.
But it was no intention whatsoever, to my knowledge, to not go through the board for the deadline.
Well, I don't quite remember it that way because I think it was too late to bring it to the board and get it in the newsletter.
That's what I figured.
And that's why we were going to approve it later and hope it was the same. If not, we would have to adjust it later on, but we would never do it without, even after the fact of discussing it at the board meeting. It was my understanding that's the only reason why I wrote it in there. Because we would discuss it and do it afterwards.
But then at the next meeting, I forgot and nobody else brought it up.
I forgot to bring it up. I apologize.
So that's 2 of us. Yeah.
So this is related to some of the queries from residents, because they were interested in applying, but they didn't know that there was an opportunity to apply. So I don't know if that,
How do
Gives you-
they find out about it if not by have seen it in the newsletter?
I'm sorry, what?
How did they find out about it if not through the newsletter?
It was today, actually, that they asked about it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you say.
It looks like Ted's
It was
holding up
today
the
that
book
they
with
were
it.
asking
Yeah.
about it.
It did show up in the newsletter, but it came out like, it came out very close to the deadline by the time people, I know, we see that, Ted.
Was it on the website?
Most people get the newsletter around the beginning.
No, it wasn't that close to the deadline. There was time. It was not that close to the deadline.
Okay,
I mean, that's,
it wasn't discussed by us in the meeting.
That's what it was not.
That's an issue, and we did hear some from that caused, it also for Janice and for a couple of residents, we did hear that it wasn't discussed in a board meeting.
no, well, that's true. I mean, we talked about the need to do it and do it, you know,
Sorry, we didn't set a date
expeditiously, but we
together.
didn't set
Right,
the date.
right.
So that's, you know, so that was left undiscussed.
Right.
And because there wasn't time between the second meeting of the month and the publication of the newsletter, you know, essentially, Pat and I, you know, put in what was a reasonable, I thought a reasonable time to give us applications and then have time to review them before the meeting, which is why the deadline ended up being whatever it was.
But my understanding of that discussion, when we talked about it, that it would come up at the meeting and that if the board confirmed it, that would be fine. If they did not, then we would have to adjust it and change the time. And
Yeah.
it never did that. And that's
We
the
did
only
not.
reason I agreed.
And that, I forgot. It could have mentioned it at the end.
I don't even understand what everybody's.
Okay, it sounds like Leslie thinks, okay, let's not worry about that.
You know.
Well, I'm inclined to
it's the
agree,
one
but,
thing we
you know,
forgot.
if the only
I
thing is,
don't think I was at the meeting.
yeah, there's only,
I would have remembered.
well, you probably would have.
Yeah,
I think there was a meeting in this.
Yeah.
The
Well,
thing
then,
is that this is a 5-month appointment if we make it now and a 4-month appointment if we wait a month.
right,
You know, if you want to, we could do that if we want to
I mean, I
essentially
wouldn't
reopen it.
mind having 2 weeks to, you know, maybe check some, you know, see if I can get a couple references or, you know, if there's some issue about posting another deadline? Is that what?
Well, what Pat's suggesting is that reopening the process, you know, and in other words, and asking if anybody else wants to apply. And then we'd have to have a new deadline and then an opportunity for interviews in the event that others did apply. And then we'd be making the appointment at the second meeting in August for somebody to basically serve from September to December.
So the notice about the opening and please apply went out in the newsletter with a deadline.
Right.
So if people got that, say, I got that newsletter, how many days did I have?
Depends on when you got it. Most people
Okay.
get it around the first of
Was
the
it
month.
like 10 days?
But there's
Seven
you know,
days?
there's the Wilseyville
7 days?
post office folks that get it, you know.
Right.
from-
I mean, I think that's sort of unfair to the 2 people that applied to, you know, it's obviously a procedural thing. The board should have done something a certain way. It doesn't change the experience for the residents and the people who applied. I mean, if enough note, I would worry about it if people got the newsletter and they had 1 day to apply because of the deadline. But if they, you know, if people had 7 to 10 days to apply, I don't have a problem with that. I would like to make the appointment make the decision at the next meeting, just to be able to, sort through what people said and possibly look at references. But I think residents had, I believe residents had enough notice. Town board should have done better at agreeing. I don't have a problem with the decision that 2 people made.
I wouldn't
did, I
mind
would
having
yell.
the time to think about it. That's the only trouble with doing these interviews and then,
And then
We don't
deciding
even-
and then deciding. to-
right.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I always have a problem with that.
I'm okay with waiting till next. It just means that, you know, whoever's appointed will miss the opportunity to participate in 1 meeting. Which, you know, half a month instead of a month.
Town people always have an opportunity to participate in more than one way.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, you know, as a voting member of the
Yeah.
board.
You're right.
So, so you want to make a motion? That we decide next time?
I would move that we, make a hiring decision for Steve's empty vacant seat, at the next, what's the date of the next meeting?
August 1st.
August 1st? Yeah, August 1st.
Okay,
Okay,
that sounds like a second.
I'll second. Sorry.
I know, getting a headache.
Anyone, any discussion about that? We're ready. Janice?
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth,
No,
Gagnon.
Yes. All right, now we're past our closing time. So that's several items to go. I move we give ourselves to 9:30. Hope we get to do it faster.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Ready to vote?
Oh, we have to vote on that, sure.
Yep. Okay, Janice?
Yes.
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter, Woodworth,
yes,
Gagnon.
Sorry. I keep kicking
It's
you.
been a
Yes.
long day.
Yeah, and my visitor's cat just escaped.
Oh, well. Okay, we're back to agreement to spend funds. And we have, from Keith and Laura, the list of, places they'd like to spend the money. And how they would be,
Okay.
where the money's coming from, and what roads it's going to be on. And I didn't print it out, but.
I can figure it out. Here's a copy we can sign.
Yeah, there's
Sign it.
actually.
Well, there's this thing that, well, that's right, it's on here.
No, wait.
I signed
So I
it.
do have a copy because,
thought
Janice
Oh.
printed it out.
I move that we approve the recommendation for spending highway funds.
I'll second that.
Any discussion about, how the money would be spent? It looked good to me.
Yeah,
Which road? Steam Mill
Yeah.
from Durfee to part of Steam Mill.
Part of Steam Mill, part of Durfee Hill,
No, the whoa,
part of Hornbrook,
it's so bad.
and part of East Mill.
Well, I'll go along with that. It's my road.
Yeah, it's your street.
Well, not, it's the road I drive on.
Yeah, right. Well, part of your road too.
Yeah.
Ready for the vote?
yeah, I am, sorry.
Janice?
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes,
Woodworth,
Yes,
Gagnon.
Yes.
That was
Sign it.
wonderful. I didn't have to say one word.
Yeah, we all have to sign off on it.
Thanks, you guys. Thank you.
Wasn't that worth staying for, Laura?
Yeah, all of this is worth staying for. I love hearing all this.
Resolution approving the homeowner rehab home. This is the one on DePuy Hollow, which I hope everybody had a chance to look at. It's, was it
I did not.
28,000?
What is it? What are we approving?
The first home that has gone through the process and
Yes.
and had been completely spec'd and had a contractor, they have a bid for, so it's ready to go forward. It needs a board concurrence that this is okay.
Who is that?
David could speak to that. I don't have it in front of me, but that was the information in the,
Is that big? What?
it's in the meeting folder.
Yeah, all the stuff we've been talking about. We're just overwhelmed by numbers and we were talking, I know we're still on highway.
This particular one involves repairing a chimney, a washer dryer area where the floor is
Oh, I
rotted.
wish, I didn't see that.
Residing the house.
cool.
There's a
Okay.
minor electrical thing to be fixed,
Okay.
and a drainage issue.
I'll move it.
Moved and seconded.
Okay,
Do you need
Who
anything
seconded
from?
I just, I don't know.
so
what-
that resolution, I think it's a resolution, all formulated for that, right? So we can just move that resolution.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was just moved and seconded by, Catherine?
You know, it was Leslie and Pat, I thought.
I think
Who
Pat
moved it?
moved it.
Pat,
Moved it, I moved it.
Pat moved it.
and we didn't have a second. If we didn't, I'll second it.
Catherine seconded.
And Catherine seconded,
Got it.
okay? All right, I guess we're ready to vote.
11 to Putrin Hollow.
11.
Deborah Mulks is the applicant. If you don't mind just a second, we will get more of these, and what was included in there is a checklist that Toma put together that says they checked everything
Okay.
that's required, description of the work, the estimate amount, and I also threw in the assessment,
Estimate, and-
kind of database information about the house. And I won't, someone will do that for the next.
Okey-doke. Cool.
Okay, yeah, okay,
Vote. Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Gagnon.
yes. The other one, CBDG related, is the multifamily application. And that information's all been, well, that's been talked about somewhere earlier. Well,
I move we approve the new grant for the, whatever it is.
What did you just say? What did she say? We're gonna start getting
she
silly.
moved that we apply for the new grant for whatever it is.
And we will approve the new CDBG grant for multifamily rehab grant stuff.
The multi.
Moving
We
that.
have to pass the resolution.
Yeah,
Yeah.
was there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Leslie seconded it.
Nah.
Any discussion about that one?
It's, I think is a great programs, and I'm very glad that we've had a champion who's tried to head us in those directions. I thank you very much.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
Sure. Janice, please.
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Gagnon.
Yes. There was one other thing. Well,
We
there's
didn't do
that.
minutes.
We're in the minutes, right? You want to take a few minutes to do the minutes? We have several that you passed over,
Okay.
please.
I think the executive session is more important.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what we
didn't we decide to do the end? I mean, agreed.
I think we should do the executive session now. That has to do with the new planning board.
Yeah.
Planning.
Oh,
And we only have 10 minutes more in the meeting that we approved time for.
Okay,
yeah.
I would have more time.
Okay,
No.
then I guess it's a wait.
Again,
Minutes a wait.
let's see how expeditiously we do the executive session and the other, and then we can come back to them. Okay, so I move we go into executive session for a briefing on the planner, search.
Second.
For
Okay, Janice,
Connors.
Yes.
Hunter,
yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
here's all this. I had it all organized. Somebody.
and I think David would be welcome to join us, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Laura would as well, as she's here physically, because that committee consists of Laura and Leslie and David and me. I'll be right back.
Oh, thank you.
You can unmute yourself if you would like on the Zoom.
Howdy. Oh, looks like anybody I wanted to talk to is already gone.
Yeah.
Watching on closed caption. What's that? Were you watching it on closed caption? Because I saw someone at some point wasn't having me. Okay, I thought you had a computer. Oh, I did. Okay. I thought it would, but I didn't do that. Okay. I didn't do it on purpose. Oh, no. I was just curious because I was curious how well it actually like subtitles what's going on, because that would be so helpful for some of this, because it's so hard to hear something. Tell me about it. Yeah. Right. And what I found is this particular room is probably the worst acoustics that you can get. Yeah. Because I can't hear them half. So I've done this a couple times I've been in construction for long enough, and you can actually do acoustical treatments in a room like this fairly easy. It would bring reverberations down to like a much more manageable level. Yeah. And it wouldn't, I mean, there's plenty of space there, like, you wouldn't even notice it. So maybe someday. No, as a matter of fact, talking about that.
Yep.
I worked for the city for many years in physics as the engineer. Yeah. I'm the guy that's I remember one day.
Hey guys in the meeting room, I'm just curious, who's talking about the sound there?
Both of us.
But who's both of you? Who?
Happened.
For what it's worth, I've done sound reinforcement in rooms that are very much like this in the past. And it can be done, it could probably be done with for little additional cost to the equipment that they already have. It just would require trying, which really hasn't happened. Money was spent, but the results were not good. It could have been done differently. One thing that has come up, which you may not be aware of, was the suggestion of installing, for example, curtains or acoustic treatment in the room. That would certainly work, but the cost of it is exorbitant. You may remember that prior to about 2010, there were curtains in the room. When the room was painted, the curtains were thrown away because they would no longer conform to fireproofing standards for public spaces. And the town board examined the possibility of purchasing new curtains that were fire retardant or resistant or whatever, and basically abandoned it when the cost went into the 5 figures in 2010 dollars. It would be just better to have better microphones and a better speaker system and a better camera. They didn't say more expensive. I believe that this could be done with two $75 cameras instead of how many $1,000 cameras they did buy. Just my 2 cents. Warren, you want to ring in on that? You have quite a bit of experience with this too.
And what you're saying is bird.
You basically said everything I would have said. I measured for the curtains and got some bids and quickly realized nobody was going to pay what would need to be bought to install it. So
yeah,
it's probably a grant situation. I guess I should put in a formal bid and then see if somebody can dig up a grant somewhere to do them. They're huge. And to get them to be inherently flame proof and do what they need to do is a lot of money.
Yes.
The central processing unit, I actually have 3 or 4 units that came out of Bailey when they upgraded. They need to be programmed, but they're really nice DSP units. They're 8-channel DSP units that have feedback control, phone, Zoom kind of stuff. It would just mean time, time in the space and figuring out what people wanted it to look like. But there are some definite choices to sort of take what there is and update it to what would be much more functioning and integratable across everything that's trying to happen.
I mean, I'm personalizing this, but I should note that I've offered many times just to put the time into it and make the best use we could with the existing equipment or small additions. And let's just say that the supervisors that I've talked to about that said that would be great, but you could never get that past the town board. They don't want a volunteer to do it. At least not if he's named Ted. Sorry.
I mean, it is something that I can see the reason why you'd want something contracted and then.
But something something that costs you nothing. Why not try?
Yeah.
It couldn't, let's put it this way, I couldn't do worse.
No, I agree there. Yeah. It's a low bar.
Yeah, very low. In fact, this is history, but when Pamela first became clerk, even with the curtains in the room, it was not that great. I don't think acoustic treatment would do that much without big acoustic treatment. But back in 2010, for her first meeting as clerk, she knows how to do some stuff too. And we got together and set up all the mics and everything. And the town board basically said, take them away. They actually didn't want to do it until, Rhonda's gone. Rhonda actually did a Human Rights Commission suit, which forced them to confront the issue, but they haven't really done much since then.
I would imagine there's grant money for accessibility stuff, and particularly after the infrastructure money and maybe even COVID money that's still floating around. Yeah. That could be applied towards assisted listening kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, since you mentioned those two, I mean, the kind of money that I hear is floating around could get a first-class job done.
Yeah.
However. Hmm.
Where it is.
I move that we hire Greg Hutnick to be the next town planner of the town of Danby with an annual salary.
So you need to exit the executive session?
Oh, yeah, you need to.
All right.
End executive session. I move that we end executive session.
Thank you.
I forgot that that's supposed to be a vote.
Okay, so vote.
Yes.
Connors,
Yep.
Yep.
Hunter,
Yeah.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Gagnon.
Yes.
Thanks.
Could
So,
you please distinctly repeat that name?
Yes, well, I'll repeat the whole motion since it was out of order. So I move that we choose to hire Greg Hutnick to be the next planner of the town of Danby at an annual salary of $74,000.
Second.
And of course, we've already talked about it, but anybody want to say anything more?
And some people who been around for a while would maybe know him as, was it Greg
Greg
Galucci?
Galucci. This individual applied to be the town of Danby planner back in 2019 and was among the finalists in a fairly large field of applicants at that time. And lost out to Jason Haremza, who was our planner for a couple of years. And so I was very pleased to have him apply. And it was a standout candidate. So you'll hear more about him. We'll put things in the Danby News about him. Danby Town News. Janice, the vote.
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Gagnon.
Yes. Well, we ran out the end of our additional time. You want to take a little bit more time for the minutes?
The ones that,
No, we just decided to do it next time, right?
Well,
I don't mind doing.
I don't mind
it, but
either.
now I have to hunt through this.
that one, the one section of batch that you better, yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, we got what, six
Come
or
on.
seven that we could get off the table. We could
Yeah.
shorten the list a little bit.
That works for me.
I move that we approve January 3rd.
Hold on.
Wait. I do do that.
Did you find those?
Put it away because we're doing this.
In my computer.
I printed it on my list here. Okay.
Right?
What are you doing?
I'm proposing.
Did you get yours?
Okay.
January 3rd. January 18th.
I'd like to, are you reading off of the list?
I'm reading off the list of things that you indicated you were ready to work at.
I would, I mean, I think, okay, go ahead. I mean, I would just mention what's written.
Yeah.
But,
Well, why not let you make the motion?
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Huh?
Why not let you
Well,
make the
if there's
motion?
things to add, then don't include, well, we need to put these in, so just do the other ones.
Okay, well, let's,
February 23rd.
Go ahead with that list, to the next list. I'll do the next one.
okay, the ones I had that I thought were okay to go were 7 of them. January 3rd, January 18th, February 7th, March 22nd, April 4th, May 22nd, and June 26th. So I move that we approve those.
I don't have that whole list here, so I can't. I have to go through my list to see if there's all.
There's a bunch more, of course, but those are the ones that we're going to say, okay, for that much.
Okay. I'll second.
What ones are we doing?
January 3rd, January 18th, February 7th, March 22nd, April 4th, May 22nd, and June 26th.
Is the special meeting June 26th? I thought it was the 26th.
26.
Yeah.
It's the 26th, yeah.
That's been moved and seconded. And my goodness, the crowd is big. Ready? Okay. Okay. The vote, Janice?
Connors,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yeah.
Woodworth,
Yes.
Gagnon.
Yes. And I believe that finishes the agenda and we can adjourn. Am I correct? I'm not forgetting anything? Okay. Thank you for the people who waited to the very end here. And see you in August 1st.
Thanks. Night.
Good night.